Mayor and council members, you are now live on YouTube and it is 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to this evening's virtual special meeting of the Livermore City Council. We actually have two meetings tonight. The first is a workshop with two components and the second is a special meeting. So, and I'll explain what all that means and how to participate, but the basic information is on the end of the agenda and on the website as to how to participate. And before the public comment, then the city clerk will also explain how to participate. So with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bonanno.
Here.
Councilmember Carling.
Here.
Councilmember Kick.
Here.
Vice Mayor Monroe.
Here.
Mayor Warner.
Here. Okay, so what we, as just mentioned, the first part of this meeting is a special workshop items, and it's with our norms and values and our rules of procedure. Now, since this is a special meeting workshop, the public comment is restricted to the items on the workshop, items 5.1 and 5.2, or let's see, I think there are 3.1 and 3.2. So those are the discussion and direction regarding the City Council shared expectations regarding the use of social media, interactions with the community and city staff, compliance with the Brown Act, and City Council meeting rules of procedure. The second item is discussion and direction regarding the City Council norms and values, including possible revisions. So before I open public comment, I want to mention items for which public comment is appropriate this evening with respect to that, and that any other topics that are not on tonight's agenda are best addressed at a regular City Council meeting in the Citizens Forum. So with that, the City Clerk, could you explain how people can participate?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tonight we are using the Zoom meeting platform. When participating in this portion of tonight's meeting, one comment may be given per person, per item, regarding only the special meeting and workshop items on the agenda. Members of the public can participate by using the raise hand feature or *9 if calling in when the item begins. Please raise your hand now if you would like to submit comments for items 3.1 or 3.2. The mayor will reopen the public comment period later in the meeting for item 4.1. Once public comment begins, each participant's name will be announced and their 3 minutes will start upon being unmuted. The mayor will announce the conclusion of the public comment period after comments have been voiced into the record. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the public comment. It would be helpful if anyone wishes to comment to specify 3.1 or 3.2 in their comments. So do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Mayor, no comments have been received.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public comment period with regarding the 3.1 and 2. And with that, can we proceed to 3.1? I would imagine we have a staff report.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, I'm your City Attorney, Jason Alcala, and I will start this discussion with you this evening. Make sure you can hear me okay. Everything's working well. Very good. By way of introduction, we had a prior meeting, a prior workshop on February 1st of this year. That workshop was to provide you with the opportunity to discuss your shared expectations about the use of social media and when interacting with the community and city staff. Also to ensure your actions are consistent with the legal requirements such as the Brown Act and the city's administration. The workshop this evening is a continuation of that discussion, and with a focus at this part of the process, your meeting rules of procedure. Now, for your meeting rules of procedure, we did make a great deal of headway at our last meeting in February, so our primary focus this evening will be that portion of your agenda that outlines what are the expectations for the City Council committee reports and matters initiated by City Manager, City Attorney, staff, and council members, as well as what are not considered meetings, quote unquote, for the purposes of the Brown Act. Now, as a recap and to review where we were previously, the purpose of the rules of procedure, well, these are essentially your parliamentary procedures for your city council meetings and establish the shared expectations for yourselves and the community. They also contain your expectations for the conduct of advisory body meetings. Again, what we did back on February 1st is we walked through your rules and made significant progress, skipped around to a few different areas, but ultimately completed most of your rules. In a quick recap, we reviewed your mayor's role, the general rules for city council meetings and conducting them. We discussed the different types of meetings, how to continue an item. We discussed your rules relative to your 10:30 rule and your 11 p.m. rule. Again, the 10:30 rule is when you canvass the rest of the city council to see whether there are any other agenda items to be reached, and if so, possibly reorder your agenda. And the 11 o'clock rule being, if you're not permitted by your rules to take up any new matter for business after 11 p.m. absent a vote of the city council. We also walked through points of order, which are dealing with something that may be amiss with the process before you. We also discussed points of personal privilege, which is the opportunity for a council member, individual council member, to respond to personal comments directed at them, particularly if they question a council member's integrity, character, or motives. We also talked about the approval of minutes and how a council member, if they weren't elected at the time or didn't attend a meeting, generally abstain from approving the minutes. But if they were a council member and simply absent, there are ways to rehabilitate, so we walked through that. We walked through the process to develop your agenda, the order of business on that agenda, citizens' rights to public comment, and your deliberative process. Before we get to the meat of this evening's conversation, I do want to highlight a few technical items that have been updated since your rules were first presented to you back on February 1st. The first is Rule 7.4.6. Now, this is the rule that deals with the procedures for teleconference meetings. We have very specific rules and procedures set forth in that 7.4.6. The challenge being the law is continuing to evolve. So what you have in your rules before you, the draft, is we have drafted and presented broader language that simply states the City Council will follow the process and procedures for teleconference meetings that are established by the state legislature and are in the Brown Act. That will allow you the flexibility once the state legislature finishes their cycle and adopts new rules. You'll be able to adopt those without having to go back and revisit these rules at that time. So we're making the city a little more nimble so you don't have to consider that today, because those rules and that state legislation is not currently available. In addition, we have a technical rule. It's in 7.4.7. This is the rule that deals with your posted notice following the adjournment and continuation of a meeting that you're working on. The additional language says that if you adjourn a meeting to an adjourned regular meeting at a future date, and the future date is less than 24 hours away, the meeting will be immediately posted on the meeting notice locations. So that was simply cleanup. That was a little oversight that we had there, so we've now articulated that more cleanly to reflect our practice. In addition, we have two potentially substantive amendments, but we want to bring those to your attention. One is currently the rules of procedure direct the city staff to publish the agenda 10 days prior to your city council meetings. Staff has proposed to make that 6 days rather than 10 days to allow for efficient processing of your agenda materials in a way that we can get everything done in time and present a good face to the public. Now, again, 6 days is still much longer than the 72 hours. That is the floor required by the government code, so you're still several days in advance. The other substantive item which you may be concerned about is the types of minutes. So Rule 7.10.3 provides that the City Council meetings will be recorded either through summary minutes or action minutes. So a summary minute being a brief description of the conversation that occurred, an action minute simply being the final action taken by council. Now, what is that? That's a vote, that's a motion, a first and a second, and what was passed or denied by that vote. So that's what's being proposed now, is rather than having summary minutes, it'll be action minutes, and to make the agenda and the minute processing that much more efficient. As you've seen on a number of your agendas, the catch-up time can take a while when you're doing these summary minutes, and so staff's proposing that we move to action minutes instead. With those items, if there's any desire to discuss any of those four changes, we can have that now, and the city clerk can respond and provide her insight, or we can move on to the meat of this agenda item. Are there any
Oh,
questions?
I think at this point we want to do 3.1. Were you just suggesting go to 3.2 before we have a conversation?
Oh, no, sir. Oh, no, sir. No, I would raise these 4 technical issues, these 4 technical changes. I was asking if there are any desire to discuss them. We see them as technical from our perspective. We want to make sure the council sees that the same way. But if they want to discuss those items, we can. Otherwise, I will move on to the real item we have before us this evening for the rules of procedure.
Okay. So what I would say on the, I'll just make one comment. I think that's appropriate to go from the summary minutes to the action minutes because all of our deliberations are fully recorded and people can see it. So I don't see a value add to summary in minutes. That's my take. Anyone else want to comment on that? Oh, Councilmember Carling.
Is that typical of other jurisdictions to have summary minutes or action minutes? Sorry.
It varies from agency to agency, but more and more agencies are moving to action minutes for the reason described. One, they reflect and capture the final decision making by the body, but there are other avenues that people are interested in to hear the discussion. Here we have the videos and other means are recording that. So that seems to satisfy that need in the minutes record what was the actual item taken. So I'm not sure if it's 50-50, but I think more moving towards action minutes.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing I would point out is that there's a lot of time required to go to summary minutes. And then I've seen over the years, people might comment that their particular key point wasn't in the summary, and then we get into a lot of trouble. So I think it's better to just, the record is what it is, it's fully there, and the action is what people need to be aware of so that they can respond appropriately. Is that a fair way to characterize it, City Attorney?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and also would the City Clerk like to say anything, or do you think we've said enough?
Thank you, Mayor. This is your City Clerk, Marie Weber. I think you have covered the majority of the issues around summary and action minutes. The main benefit is that the video we do keep for a couple of years as far as the city's retention schedule goes, and summary minutes are very labor intensive and do take a great deal of time and run the risk of incorrectly translating somebody's intent of their public comment. So there's a lot of benefit from action minutes. Thank you very much.
Yeah, less is more in this case. Councilmember Bonanno.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. Having been on the Planning Commission for so long, it's very difficult to, if you've been at the meeting, to sort of tease out the real intent of someone's comment or the point they were making. So I agree with that completely. I had a similar question about the notice of the agenda going from 10 days to 6, where we have a floor of 72, which again, we have plenty of headrooms there in some sense, but and I appreciate how much goes into preparing these packages. I know it can be heroic efforts to get it out. Will there be an effort though to do as much better than 6 days as possible? I mean, will we always try to do better than that in cases where the package is less onerous? Is that a reasonable question?
Yes, so Councilmember Bonanno, the question I believe you're asking is a relevant one, which is the rules of procedure will set the expectation that the agendas for regular meetings be published 6 days in advance of the meeting rather than the 72 hours, which is set in the government code, so you're doing more. If the council has a desire to have them printed early, either as a general rule or as is usually the more likely situation, when you have a specific meeting, you can provide that direction to the staff, the city council can, and we can endeavor to do more than 6. But what we're setting now is an expectation that 6 is what the council would like to see under normal circumstances. But if you have a desire to give more notice and publish earlier, by all means, the city council can give that direction to staff either at that meeting or we could include something here in the rules today. But I will say the hard line rule would be 6 days in advance.
Councilmember Bonanno, it's your city manager, Mark Roberts. The machinery to put out the agenda sort of works backwards from publish date. And so the published date would be the one that we are shooting for. And then we sort of roll back, a series of steps that take about 3 weeks from that published date. And so it's not a date that would be flexible under normal circumstances. So as your city attorney noted, if we did have a very unique situation where we wanted to get something out early, that would be possible, but that would sort of be on council direction. And the expectation would be, if you agree with this, that your agenda would come out the great majority of the times at that 6-day time point.
Okay, I got it. It's the working backwards part that I probably didn't appreciate, that sort of determines the day ahead of time. Okay, that's fine. That answers my question. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, I mean, one way for us to think about it, some packages are inordinately large. So I would say if we expect to see a lot of stuff, then we'll need more time. But my own experience is, the 6 days is good enough. The 3 days was definitely not for us to do a good job of reviewing everything. So if we see some big, pig in a python or something coming at us, we ought to, maybe we get it a little bit sooner. But other than that, we got to have enough time to do a good job.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we received the direction we were seeking on those items. Appreciate the council's comments, and we do see them as technical, but we do appreciate the impact it has upon you. So we'll proceed with the red lines as set forth in your agenda packet today. And now that brings us to the primary item, which we wanted to continue to have a conversation about. At our last meeting in February, we made it as far as that aspect of your agenda, which is council committee reports and matters initiated by city manager, city attorney, staff, and council members. And this is Rule 9.7 in your rules of procedure. I'm going to break that into 3 different aspects to guide our discussion this evening. The first of which is the council committee reports. The second of which will be matters initiated, and the third of which is not currently reflected in your rules of procedure. So I'm going to call that the general platform. But let me do the following. Let me describe the situation, give some background to that, and then I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor, to walk us through the discussion for each one of those items in turn. So to begin, I'd like to focus on the council committee reports. Now, that aspect of your agenda is designed initially for the city council members to meet their statutory obligation to provide brief reports on meetings attended at the expense of the local agency. That requirement was implemented in response to AB 1234. Yes, that's the bill number, as iterative as it seems, AB 1234 in 2006. And that requires, if the city were to pay the expense for a city council member to attend a meeting or any advisory body, they're then required to report out at their next meeting. Now, you have, as the city council, adopted a resolution to implement that policy. And that policy states that the official shall briefly report orally or in writing on meetings attended at the city's expense. So what you have here is a situation we've had a little bit of mission creep. These council committee reports, one, have been expanded to include all advisory body meetings or any meeting attended by a council member, regardless of whether it was reimbursed by the city. And two, most recently, the city is engaged in a practice to have the council members provide that report in written form, which your resolution provides for, rather than orally reporting. And that would meet the requirements of AB 1234. So when we get to the discussion, what we'd be looking for is, one, are you comfortable with limiting it just to those committee reports when the city pays the expense of your attendance? And two, are you comfortable with using the written report? And if so, we can work through the time and the date to submit those to the city clerk so she can get those into the record and she can go over what your current practice is. The second one that we're going to go through.
So if I could, you want to just have the discussion in order, because we might forget what you said.
Certainly. I think in the time in response to that, certainly. So let's walk through the committee reports, and then we will pick up the matters initiated aspect next. But for the council committee reports, the issue we're looking for guidance and direction on, Mr. Mayor, is one, should the rules and the expectation limit the committee reports to only those that are reimbursed by the city for the expense of your attendance? So we want some guidance there. The second one is, if you are going to use it either for either just those that are reimbursed or all of them, do you want to utilize solely the written report process? And then if so, we can walk through from the city clerk's guidance when that would need to be submitted by the council members in order to meet the agenda packet. So the first question is the breadth and scope of your reporting out.
So I'll go first on this one. Since I was somewhat of an instigator on trying to, evolve what we're doing. So and we can all, the rest of us can weigh in too. I think going to all of the things that we attend on the city's behalf is putting that in there, but I don't know that we need to do it orally. And I would therefore say I'm willing to expand it beyond the just that paid for, because I think it's instructive for the community to know what is happening. Now, we've also are in the process of exploring how to do it in writing. Now, you said on yours solely, and so I would suggest this, that we put into the matrix that we've been testing out what we attended, links to the agenda of that meeting when they're available, and then what do we view to be the highlight, not a summary. It's again, not just the a summary of everything of the agenda, but just what's important for the council and the community to hear. And then the other piece of it was what upcoming action items might the rest of the council want to have an opportunity to weigh in on and influence the rest of the council's votes when they attend these different meetings. So that's where I'm at on it. Let's have everything that we're attending on the city's behalf, put it in writing, and then only note or orally that which is important for the community to focus on and the rest of the council. So that's my thought on it. So with that, see who was, it was Councilmember Kick.
I agree with your statement that it's important for the community to know what's going on, not just the paid ones. And those are actually pretty minimal compared to all the stuff that we do. And then I would agree because, I worked with Trish and staff on coming up with our matrix, and there was a lot of, what should we include and what should we not? And I think we've been doing this for a few weeks now. And so I think limiting how much we're putting in there for our own time's sake and the reality of how people are going to use it would be beneficial. So I like your thoughts there. And then I guess I'm asking my fellow council members, should we keep it that limited? I'm happy to keep it, the agenda, highlight, and do we need to bring it to council? So that would be just 3 sections, which we can easily bring that down to.
Okay, Vice Mayor Monroe.
Generally agree with both of you in different ways. My concern is, both to limit that which we do not need to talk about and to make sure that we do highlight that which we do. And then the thing that we haven't talked about are those things that really do affect the city in one way or another. I particularly want to call out the way that I mostly in the past, but maybe I'm sure coming up, Councilmember Carling has talked about stop waste and bringing the community into that discussion. I think that idea that we're connected has been really, really important. That's been a model for me. I don't do it as often or as well as I should, but I sort of pay attention to that as being a model. So that's finding ways to make those discussions happen is one thing I think we should encourage. However, when these take place discourages the effective communication. In general, when it takes place at 11 o'clock at night, there's 5 people listening, 4 of whom are frequently staff. I may be exaggerating those numbers just a little bit. And so I'm wondering if there is a way when we do have these substantive issues or these educational issues, if we can have them at a time, make them more educational. Otherwise, I like the idea of reporting briefly in writing for most of these items.
I'm not quite sure what you're suggesting, because it's only until the council member reports out that we know whether it's significant or not. So we can't rearrange the agenda to put something in front. So let's try it. If I make this recommendation, let's try it the way we've just outlined and see when there's a situation where it might have needed earlier in the evening. But I would also suggest that as we get our communications improved, that we'll make the appropriate splash on our website about something. So let's think, how about that for letting us just try it out, and then if there's another need, we can expand it. Now, Councilmember Carlin.
Yeah, I'm generally okay. One question I have about the form is, do we have to fill it out separately for each meeting? Is there a way we can do all of our meetings on one form and hit submit once?
So if I can respond, that's something that I've noted as well. You know, forms are fine, but they're incredibly inefficient for something that's repetitive. So I think we should take it as an action item to have a form where we just, like a spreadsheet, you just update it for that evening. So I think that the form, in terms of efficiency, needs some significant upgrade, is the way I would phrase it. So I agree with you. Councilmember Bonanno.
Yeah, I concur with the go forward plan. I think that I really appreciate what Councilmember Monroe said about the fact that some of these interesting things that we really think the public would be interested in, that are going on outside the city that we learn about, you know, no one's going to be there at 11 o'clock. So as you say, I really do think there are things that are not only important, but just interesting that the public would like to know. I like hearing what all the other committees are doing. You learn about waste, you learn about water, you learn about energy, you learn about all these things that's going on with the school district. So just emphasizing what people have already said, having ways to get these little tidbits of information that I think people would appreciate knowing into the public. Other ways besides the meeting, I think would be more effective. So I'm good with what we've just talked about. I would like a matrix rather than a form, and we can just make ourselves a little bit more efficient. So I'm all good with that. Thanks.
And if thank you. And if I may, we have a lot of issues that are, spinning up online and various things that haven't yet come before the council, and people are sending us emails asking this or that. And so this is connected to our website, and how do we actually get important information available so that when somebody in the community wants to ask a question about something, they know how to easily find it. So there's a connection there, and I would imagine that the subcommittee that we have on communications will be helping us there. So I think I don't see any more comment on this item. So it's a written report. It is expanded beyond just those that are paid for, and orally will emphasize that which is important. So, City Attorney, is that clear?
Certainly. So I taken away, my notes reflect what you just reiterated, but let me walk through them so I make sure I've accurately captured them. The direction the council's desire here is to adjust this rule to deal with their council's reporting for the meetings it attends, and to have a written report for all meetings attended, to in that report to note overall what was discussed, and to highlight important issues. Also, to have an oral report if there's an important issue that the council and the community should be aware of at the meeting itself. And you provide a direction on two other items that are not actually incorporated into the rules. One direction item was to revisit the form itself to make it more user-friendly, and two, to have a consideration where those reports are actually broadcast or published on the city's website to provide that level of transparency and information to the community.
Yeah, well, of course, it's almost, I'd love to have a rule that says we have to be efficient. So, but I agree with not putting it in this one. But I think there's a slight nuance here in what you said. We're only going to post the link in this form to the agenda. We are not going to attempt to summarize the agenda. We are only going to note that which we think is important. If somebody wants to know the entire meeting, they can go to the agenda. I don't want to waste time. The same thing we said about summary minutes. We don't want to do that.
Certainly. And one thing, that's an item I did not have consensus on, so thank you for bringing that back to me. You had mentioned early in the conversation when reporting to provide a link in that form to the meeting agenda for that, either if it was a regional board, a link to that agenda, if the material is otherwise available, if it's a community meeting, because you have to report on that, to include that in the report. Is that aspect the will of the council as well?
Yes.
I'm
That's
seeing it's
good
not
with it.
very good.
Okay.
Very good. I will adjust the rule to incorporate that direction, those items.
And one further refinement here. Rather than posting a link to the specific agenda for that meeting, it's way more efficient to post the link to where that organization keeps its agendas. That way we don't have to keep messing with what's that particular link that'll evolve. We just need to know, if you want the agenda, you go here. And that'll just make it easier for people and for us as well.
Okay, so as I understand, you're posting generally to that group's webpage where all their agendas can be found, and that way the public can go and find that agenda that was described in the report.
Right, and that's consistent with Councilmember Carling's desire to be efficient. We
Very
just
good.
don't want to we don't want to waste time on administrative stuff that's not value add.
Very good. Thank you for that. I'm seeing we've got head nods. I think we made some good progress on that item. The last item I would request is we don't have to include it in the rule, but we can talk about expectations of when that report would be due to the city clerk so she can include it with the agenda packet. Madam City Clerk, do you have a proposed time, working back from the agenda date or the publication date, when you'd like to receive those reports from the council?
Yes, thank you. My proposed time would be 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting.
And that means it comes out as a supplemental material.
Correct. We would include that in the supplemental packet that goes out to the public and to the city council.
So it's in the record and it can be gotten to if anybody wants to look back.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. So if that's the will of the council, we can incorporate that date and time into the rules as well.
Okay, I think you can see that covering each of these separately is better than going through all of them and then coming back through. So I think are we finished on this one?
We are, so thank you for that. Moving into the second aspect of this agenda item is the matters initiated component. Now, it does speak a little bit to what we just discussed, because obviously when you report out on something of interest, an upcoming action item by a regional body that may need city council action, that's when you move into this component. So matters initiated does two things. One is the agenda building portion of your meeting for future agendas. It's an opportunity for you to seek information from staff. It's also an opportunity for you to provide direction to staff with regard to future meetings based upon comments received that evening. It also gives you the opportunity for direction on ministerial matters. Now, so there's a little bit of conversation with regard to what we just talked about. Now, initiating a matter becomes a little challenging, and the challenge is presented by the Brown Act. The Brown Act, again, as we know, is designed for transparency, not efficiency. So if you have an item that comes up during matters initiated, you can't take action on that item that evening. You have to set it for a future meeting. And so if something comes up as an urgency, which tends to happen from time to time on these regional advisory bodies or otherwise, you would need to give direction to establish that at a next regular meeting, or if it's urgent, perhaps a special meeting. So I just want to maintain expectations of what we need to do in order to comply with the Brown Act. One of the challenges that we have encountered in our practice, so I will share that with you as a staff member supporting as a city council, is how to use the matters initiated component of the agenda. Oftentimes, you will learn of a good idea or something that's happening in another city and want to explore that. Oftentimes, that'll come to the city council. Some of you may be more aware of the item than others, and then we look for head nodding to add it to a future agenda or to go off and prepare materials for the city council. Sometimes, again, given the constraints of the Brown Act, you don't have full information relative to make a decision whether to add that to a future agenda. So that's the decision-making process, and that's where we have the chicken and egg situation. Mark is prepared today to walk you through how to think about matters initiated, some of the challenges associated with that, And he has some proposals for ways, one, to help streamline this process with your help and how to interact with him, as well as how to maintain expectations when you have a matters initiated. What is the return time based upon staff resources? Now, our rules do speak that we're already required to provide you that information, which is how much can be accomplished within your existing budget based upon our matters initiated, but it gets a little challenging from time to time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roberts to continue this conversation, and then we'll seek the council's direction on what you'd like to do with that aspect of this rule. Mark?
Thank you, Jason. Mark Roberts, your city manager. So as your staff is trying to translate your direction into action, we want to make sure that we're communicating clearly with all of you a couple of different things. And of course, the main thing is to use the public's resources effectively and efficiently. So one of the questions that you have individually had is trying to better get an understanding of either what your own request might require as far as staff resources, or what other council members' requests might need before agreeing that that actually should be added to the work program. So your staff has sort of explored a number of different ideas and is proposing sort of a working approach to see if this ultimately gets us where we need to go. The idea would be for those matters which are not immediately created out of the meeting. And our quick look at that is about 2/3 of the matters are sort of initiated independent of the activities that happened in the meeting immediately prior to the request. That in those cases that the council member have an interaction with the city manager. And so that basically would explore several things. The first of which would be to make sure that staff understands what the matter actually is, can ask some probing questions, can understand sort of what the nature of that is, where information may be. The second part of that is for very straightforward issues, for example, a quantitative ask that is important to the council member, but you believe the community might also want to know. That could be done in such a way where that could then simply be a question under matters that could be immediately answered. How many of this do we have or have we done over the last 3 years? And we'd be able to answer, we did this number in this way. That way we would sort of eliminate sort of the administrative burden of creating the work program, assigning that out to staff, getting that up the chain of command and getting it back in front of you in some way through a memo or an item on your agenda. So basically a way to dispense of the very straightforward issues that are more or less information either gathering or sharing. The second bundle would be to better define essentially the next two categories, which would be the relatively straightforward that takes some analysis and work and would have to actually be that, and to differentiate those from the dramatically scaled items that would require an enormous amount. And as a part of the discussion, there would really be the question of, do you need the level of information and depth that might require a significant amount of public resources, or could we do a more generalized response based on something else that might be more efficient? And you would then at least have an understanding as the person who is going to initiate that item of, I'm going to ask for a big item and now I know what that is. As a part of that discussion too, your staff could then give an estimate essentially of the resources necessary, especially for the larger projects. And then could, as a part of our response when that item was initiated, give that understanding to the rest of the council members, because that essentially I think is one of the pieces that's missing from our current process is I don't know what I'm agreeing to. I don't know whether that's hard or easy. I don't know whether that's complicated or could be done relatively quickly. So with essentially this additional step, we could create that sort of an interaction. That then is more of a process than a change to your rules, because essentially what it does is it fits into your rules, which is for the largest scale items, that generally then requires us to agendize that, because that's going to move something else off of the items that we were going to achieve. And you've already got something in your proposed rules that deals with that issue. which is if we want to put something else that is of scale onto our work programs as a city, that would allow that discussion to happen, and also an explanation or a discussion of what else sort of is going to happen later as a part of your allocation of resources. So with that, the basic theme here is that an early check-in with the city manager prior to the matters initiated, with enough time to give us a chance to both sculpt that item to get a better understanding of it, to do an estimation of the needed resources, and to be able to provide that before the matters is then presented in public forum, and then having the council give direction based on that information.
So good. Councilmember Carling, fast on the buzzer.
Yeah, can I just summarize that if it's not something that's brought up at the meeting, we talk to you first?
Yes,
Okay.
for everything that wasn't brought up right at the meeting, just minutes before, you have a conversation with the city manager.
Okay, sounds good to me.
So let me try summarizing the way I heard it. There's stuff, and you didn't quite say it like this, but I want to make sure. There are sometimes things that people bring up in citizens forum that are not on the agenda, in which they are asking for some action or relief or something. And those are the spontaneous ones, right? So what was your thought on those?
And the proposal on those would be to continue to deal with them as they come up, and use essentially the process that we have. So this solves the 2/3 of the items that aren't that, but would not sort of deal with that particular item.
So I'm a little surprised on the numbers you have, because I don't think 1/3 of the items are coming from citizens forum. But is that what you're saying?
Well, I did not go very far back, but as a sort of our quick check is there's a number of items that come from citizens forum. You know, the actual number may be smaller if I go back and get a large enough.
Yeah, because the way I would have characterized it, if I can try this, there's a certain number that come from citizens forum. And recently we haven't had too many coming out of there. However, there are those that seem to randomly appear from the council, but which aren't quite random, that may not have been run past you in advance. And then that's one category. And then there are the others that might occur based on a particular agenda item discussion, which says, oh, I want to follow up, and it sort of engenders a matters initiated. So I think what you're talking about is the amount that come from that plus the citizens forum versus the ones that we on the council have actually had a chance to think about based on our other interactions, and presumably have a chance to run past you first.
Correct.
Is that okay? And so I think that the ones that generally come from citizens forum are relatively straightforward. And in many cases in the past, when we had the live meetings, they were handled by having somebody on your staff hand the person the business card to follow up, right? I mean, that's the typical response in those that I've seen, just to make sure that we understand what the issue is, and then have staff a chance to work through the normal channels. And then in most cases that does resolve the issue, and it doesn't necessarily have to come back to us. So that's relatively minor impact on city resources, the way I would say it. So I don't think we had, of the things that come out of citizens forum, for the most part, I don't think they're too major. Is that a fair assessment?
Most of them are not.
Okay. But now the ones that randomly pop into our minds during an agenda item discussion, they could or they could not. And then the other ones for which we have been talking to members of the community and had ideas, those could be much more major. So for instance, our whole program to help the businesses through COVID, et cetera, that's a big deal. And that was a matters initiated, but it was, organically appeared. So I think that, I mean, I'm totally agree that for those for which we have a heads up, we should run it past you first to make sure that it makes sense. I mean, and that it's possible. And even for the others, I would say that we should be comfortable having the discussion when somebody mentions it, that to step back and say, does this make sense? So I think it's kind of a way we treat each other in comfort to just get to it. And I think the other thing I would add here is this, what we should maybe emphasize more and make more explicit is that if there is a matters initiated, we need to understand the trade-off. What pushes down in the priority? I think, I've been guilty of it many times, of just asking for something and just expecting it to pile on and not really understanding the impact. And then you guys will have a meeting after meeting saying, what happened? What are we going to do, right? And you try and figure it out. So I think the point here is given the nature of the tightness of the resources and everything, we just need to be better at understanding the impact of a new ask. Is that a fair way to phrase this?
Yes, sir.
So I've got the message, and so I'm hoping you'll help keep me in line, and that the other council members will. Anything else? Any other council member? Oh, Councilmember Bonanno.
Yeah, I just real quick comment. I mean, if I were a member of the public right now listening to this, it would all seem kind of arcane and tedious, maybe at best, that we're going through all this. But I think the gist of it is we want to be as responsive to the public as quickly as we can when we hear things during meetings. And we want to make sure that when we give direction or ask for things, as you just said, we understand its ranking compared to everything else the city. The assumption is city is always pretty much full up at using its resources at 100% capacity. So if we ask for something else has got to go down or be moved off or be delayed, or we won't do the thing we just asked for. So it's just a matter of being more explicit about trade-offs, having staff feel like they can tell us, that's really a hard one you've just asked for. Let's talk about it. So these things, again, seem fairly tedious in some sense, but they're really important in terms of how well we do our job, how well staff can do its job, and how responsive we are to what we hear from the public.
Councilmember, Vice Mayor Monroe.
So yes to all of that. I really appreciate the way this is framed as here's your job for council, here's your job for staff. Let's talk to each other. I think that for me, the thing that would be most helpful in terms of thinking about resources is how long will this take? How much will it cost? Balanced with how critical is it? And I'm thinking about the example you raised, Mayor Warner, of the help for the businesses. That was something that came up as a matter initiated. It took a fair bit of staff time, and it was absolutely critical at that time to have it happen immediately. So having the response from staff, from both staff and council, to make that distinction, I think is important. So yeah.
Okay, and the other thing I'd want to do as a backdrop is acknowledge that, and it's especially come to a head in the this past year with the pandemic, is that staff is working really hard and pressing the limits, and we have to acknowledge it and be very respectful of people's time and their lives. And we have to be very judicious in what we ask for. Is there any more on this topic that is needed from us?
No, I think we have an understanding on this one. And what we'll do just as a practice here is run this and then perhaps have a discussion several months in and sort of see how it's going. Does this work for people? So we will check in on that, since we're talking about, in this case, a practice rather than literally something that's part of your rules. But I think it will help us, as you said, be more efficient and effective with the public's resources.
And it requires us to be all comfortable with having this kind of conversation with each other. So that's a key that gets back, the second, item 3.2 in some respects.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for that. That was a good discussion. I will coordinate with Mark and staff to see whether any adjustments are necessary to the rules to reflect this expectation, but it may not be necessary, but you did a really good job of setting the expectation for staff to then pursue in the future. So thank you for this conversation. Mr. Mayor, if I may proceed with one last item to talk about or discuss relative to this portion of the agenda. And the aspect is a little different. This is just something we've observed as far as a growing practice, which is using this portion of the agenda as an opportunity for individual council members to engage and share their thoughts with the community. And that's something I wanted to put before you, Mr. Mayor, and the City Council to determine, do we want to use or do you want to utilize this portion of the agenda for individual council members to speak on topics of interest within the community directly to the public? Again, that's not taking an action item, not creating a future agenda item per se, but just sharing thoughts, views, opinions on, say, the issue du jour. But we have been seeing that as far as a staff level. Not quite sure where that fits within the agenda. We've been seeing it appear at this portion, but I wanted to put that before you, Mr. Mayor, and the council to see, is this an opportunity that you want to use as a platform to have general conversations between the council members individually and the community, or is there a different way to address that? Mr. Mayor, I'll turn it over to you to guide the discussion.
Okay, thank you. I see Councilmember Kick is first on the buzzer.
I've noticed that as well, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm looking forward to eventually having a social media policy discussed, because I feel like there's not a lot of other opportunities for us to have a very open public dialogue. So I would like to see us have other opportunities that aren't late at night and that could reach larger groups of people. But I feel like until then, there maybe isn't as much opportunity. It's not, especially we're still not in person. So I'm kind of like, no, I don't think it's necessary overall. But for right now, I feel like many of us, this is our only chance to speak directly to the public. So if and when we get to that other policy, maybe we could remove that as a normal practice. Just a suggestion.
Good. Hopefully it's not an if. Anyone else want to comment at this point? Vice Mayor Monroe.
Oh, I'll just say guilty as charged. I would agree with Council Member Kick, and that is part of the communications policy. I'd say that we're working towards is to find other means of communicating with the public. I think that this is there are times and places, and we've gone back and forth, some of us, on what is appropriate for the city. Do we take stands? Do we not take stands? When we speak from the dais, even the virtual dais, that does speak to, that's a statement we make in our role as council members, and it carries some weight. And that may not, it may be that we don't want that to happen at the dais. So I think it's a serious issue. Like I said, guilty as charged, but I'm happy to take it wherever we decide to put it as well. Looking for other thoughts on that.
Councilmember Carling.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think it's a place for offering our opinions, and I guess I wonder about the characterization that Councilmember Kick described it as a public dialogue. There's no opportunity for a dialogue because of the Brown Act. It's not an agendized item. So it ends up being a monologue. And I guess I disagree with that. I don't know what the social media policy is going to be, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to participate. So I'm not sure how important it is for the public to hear my point of view on, I don't know, climate change or Black Lives Matter or other things that are current, either locally or nationally. So I disagree. I don't think it's a place to have a monologue about how we're feeling or a political point of view. Thank you.
Councilmember Bonanno.
Yeah, I just have a question about it. Maybe I just need a little clarity. So if we were to bring up a topic that something we thought was interesting that occurred in a different city, or something that would then be something that where we would, if we're talking, we are sort of telegraphing, we're giving information about our feeling about a certain subject. And what if something related to that comes back as an agenda item? Is that a Brown Act violation that we've already shared to some degree what our feeling is about something just by how we describe it and what topics we're bringing up? So that would be my question.
I'd see the city attorney would like to say something.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Bonanno, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. That is the natural tension we encounter during your agenda building portion of your meeting, which is that natural tension when someone brings something up. Obviously, it's of interest or it wouldn't have been mentioned. So that's something that where Mark and I have to be Johnny on the spot, really watching to make sure the dialogue does not get into a discussion, but rather is constrained. That's what I'm saying when I mentioned the Brown Act is built for transparency, not efficiency, because it is a one-sided conversation. Say, I'd like to put this on the agenda so we can have a discussion. That naturally encourages you as council members, as being inquisitive individuals. Why? What's going on here? I'd like to have information. And that's where we get the natural tension. The Q&A that Mark is proposing, we just mentioned a moment ago, for that expectation, allows him to provide some framework to help you make an informed decision whether to add to a future agenda.
Right. I mean, let me just clarify my question. That part I understand, but it seemed to me we were opening up for consideration, from what I just heard from my fellow council members, about not quite extemporaneously, but talking about something that we think we want to share with the public, something that's interesting or important to us, not necessarily focused on making it an agenda item. I see how that path goes. Question is, at what point do we start talking too much about things that we might see on an agenda later, and we've somehow already given our opinion on it? Does that make sense? It wouldn't be the specific item we're going to be asked to deliberate on in some future agenda. It could be something related enough that we've described how we feel about it. I don't know. I'm not trying to make trouble here. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clear on what the bounds are.
No, I think you're asking really good questions. So let me see if I can provide a little more insight to help answer, fill that void you're trying to fill. If you're giving policy direction, you'd like to do something. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. Are you hearing that?
You're
Yes, we are
breaking up.
Let me mute and try again. Is that any better? Okay. The rules, it would not necessarily be a Brown Act violation. It's a Brown Act violation if three of you, a majority, were to start discussing and taking action on an item during this portion of the agenda when it's not agendized. That's a Brown Act violation. Stating your opinion as far as a future policy is generally not a Brown Act violation either. Again, Brown Act violations occur when more than three or more of you get together in a non-agendized meeting to talk shop, to talk about items within your subject matter jurisdiction. The other issue I think you're probing at, Gene, I want to draw the distinctions between, which is taking a position on a project. So someone has an application pending before the city. Taking a position on a project in advance of that being presented to the city council could raise due process issues, and that's slightly different than a policy issue. So again, it's not a Brown Act issue, but it's a separate issue with regard to due process. When it's a policy issue, you can use established policies as the city council. You take legislative acts. You have that opportunity to telegraph, and you do that quite regularly, particularly when you're in the campaign mode. If it's a policy matter, it's okay. It's not a Brown Act violation, unless you get together with the majority of yourselves again. But it could be a due process if you say, I'm never going to vote for this particular project because of X, Y, Z, without having that project before you to consider everything. That would be a disqualifying situation, but not for a Brown Act violation. That's a due process issue. I hope that helps.
It does. I mean, what I would say is not, I'm never going to vote for that particular project. That seems obvious. It's like, wow, I didn't really like what somebody, some city council in Seattle did about X, Y, or Z. Okay. Is that basically telegraphing how I would, I think I understand it. I don't want to belabor it, but to me, it's a slightly different question than speaking about a particular agenda item that we will get versus something very similar that we thought was interesting, and we've decided to, pontificate a little bit about what we thought about it. But just let me wrap up. This will be my last comment on this item. I'm not likely to have a lot of these myself that I initiate or that I bring up for discussion, as long as the bounds are clear and everybody understands it. I don't have a problem with other council members who want that, that ability. I don't have a problem with it. We just need to be clear, and we need to, make sure we're clear about the rules and that everybody's staying in those bounds. So that's all I had. Thanks.
Could I ask you this? It sounds good, but do you have any sense of what those bounds would be? I mean, this is to Councilmember Bonanno.
Oh, I wondered. Okay.
Yeah, because no, it's good to say that if we have the rules, we'll stay in bounds. But I think what we're talking about here are the bounds.
Right. Okay. So let's just say I said, wow, this city, I'm making one up, Portland, some city outside Portland, the same size as Livermore, they decided to take all their streets and make them one way in each direction and convert the other lane fully to bike lanes. And boy, that sounds really hard and doesn't sound like a great idea to me or something. I mean, I'm making up an example that we could end up having a similar item brought to us. That's
one. But what I think I've also heard here, and I'll get to Councilmember Kick in a second. What I've also heard here, though, earlier from Councilmember Carling, is whether we want to start opining on national issues from and especially from our own individual political points of view. That was, I think, the question that Councilmember Carling raised. And so that's the one I think we're fundamentally going to be asked to give our opinion tonight on. So with that, I see Councilmember Kick.
I get that if we're talking about serious political issues, I mean, I think we're referencing the January 6th and how we commented on that as a council. But what I see when I was talking about speaking to the public, I get that it's a monologue because they can't respond, but I think it's my responsibility as a leader to make comments on things. So, next month's Pride Month, I will absolutely at some point be in matters initiated saying it's Pride Month. I just want to openly, let everybody know Happy Pride Month. And I can't wait to, see maybe something that might be coming on the agenda about that. But as an openly queer woman, like as a leader, having somebody see that an elected official recognizes who they are, I think is important. And there's not a space for me to do that. There is no public social media policy or anything yet. So this is my space for people to see an elected leader recognize those types of things. So that is important, I think, to younger generations specifically. And we have proof of it. After a previous council approved raising the pride flag as a member of Livermore Pride, we had so many people come out and saying how much it meant to have a council member acknowledge their existence, right? So it's a different reason for leadership. It's not a policy decision. It's just, hey, I see you. I'm here as a public official. I see you. I think those things are important. I get that especially when it's a very contentious issue like the 6th, that it could bring excess emotions that might not be necessary at a meeting. But I want to be clear, I understand it's a monologue, but sometimes those monologues have value in the community if they make your community members and your constituents feel well represented and seen and heard.
Vice Mayor Monroe.
Only if I can unmute. So I've thought a lot about this over the last couple of years because it is that space between what does a leader do? And my first move toward thinking about being, running for office or just being, what do I want from my leaders? Had to do with an increase in hate acts in Livermore, one of which was directed at my people shortly after 2017, late in 2016 and early in 2017. And I wanted some action from my city that would say that, oops, wait a minute, I don't have my video on. Sorry about that. that would speak to. I think as Councilmember Kick said, that I was acknowledged that the leaders in my community, the elected leaders, cared. So that's spurred some of my thoughts going forward. With national events, and I would point to 9/11 as well as January 6th, and two very different ways. These things happen in one place. They are national, but they also affect all of us. They change the climate of the country. They change the way we look at each other at a local level. I would question whether or not we shouldn't say something. I don't know what that is, but I think that it's there. On the other hand, as I've had these conversations with some of the city staff, the idea of what is a city for as opposed to what happens nationally, there's a separation there, or there's been a separation there. And that separation is between the cities, what the city does is get stuff done, fix the streets, fix the water, which are critical, make sure that the finances are in order, make sure the businesses are functioning, build things, and that it takes place in the background. It seems to me that we're at every level of government, local, county, state, national, having a moment of engagement. And I think that's somewhat of what we're reflecting here and now. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm just trying to frame this as, I think we are being asked by at least, I think it's a mixture. Some people are saying, no, shut up. And others are saying, say more. So, and I think that we're seeing that on council as well. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do think that that's the framing that we're looking at.
Where I'm personally coming from is, in my mind, local politics should be nonpartisan. So I think there are national issues that have to be recognized. When some significant event happens to us as a nation, then for sure. But what we have to be careful of is not putting a partisan lens on whatever is said. So that's the trick, I believe. And so where I personally would come from is that I believe we should be nonpartisan, because we are here for all of the citizens, and we do have significant stuff to do to assure their safety and well-being. And to the extent we engage in partisan points of view, it only serves to divide. And so I'd stay away from it, is my own thought. So if the rule that Councilmember Bonanno alluded to, the rule I would have, no partisan point of view espoused, and I will not espouse a partisan point of view. That's where I'm coming from. But I will acknowledge significant events. That's how I would handle it. Vice Mayor Monroe.
So to that point, I think that question of what is political and what isn't is actually, it's a serious question. Councilmember Kipp said that she would be saying Happy Pride, Pride Month. That, for some members of our community, would be considered a political statement. So I guess one question. Hang on. Sorry. Okay. So the question is how do we define that? I mean, if we talk about political, you independent, Democrat, Republican, sure, that's easy. But when we're talking about some of the actions that we take, some of the words we use, some of the stances that we have simply by who we are, those are interpreted politically by many people in different ways.
Sure. And you're right in pointing out that what I just said probably wasn't doable, except for this modification. We have on substantive issues develop policies. For instance, we do with, we're very upfront and proud of flying the pride flag, right? So we have, as a council, come together and said we have certain positions, and especially right now on, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about later, but equity and inclusion. We have, as a council, agreed on what our position is. And I don't believe that it's necessarily partisan, but as you point out, everybody will object to something at some level. But so the modification I would put in there, to the extent on some of these societal issues that we have, as a council, taken a position, that we're consistent with that, but that we don't try and go beyond what we've already agreed to because of our own political views. So I would ask, if I may, Councilmember Carling, am I getting close to what you're thinking, or can you
Yes.
add to this?
No, that's exactly right. Thank you.
So I would like to do this if we could, because what I've heard is that we're really a little uncertain what to do here, because it is connected to the our social media policy. And so I would, if we could leave it at this point, is that we will stay nonpartisan. We will be consistent what we've already agreed to with respect to the societal issues, and they'll be very judicious, and that we leave it at that at this point. Be very cognizant of what we've all heard tonight, and that we revisit this again when the social media policy comes back. And what I'm a little disconcerted by is when Councilmember Kick said, "If," I mean, who's got this? And if I may, and when is it coming back? And I don't know, maybe the city manager, you could speak to this. Where are we on it?
Well, we certainly have the two members of your council subcommittee or focus area that were weighing in onto this. And I do know that there have been some conversations on some of the items dealing with the attorney's office on that one. So at this point, I also know that our deputy city manager has had some involvement with this as well. So Christine, anything to add on sort of the status?
Yes, good evening, council. This is Christine Martin, your deputy city manager. No, Mark, you hit it on the head. It is in process, and a couple of components are trying to move a little faster than others as priority allows. So a couple of pieces are getting reviewed by the attorney's office right now. And then a couple of pieces are still sitting with some members of our communications team. We're getting some staff input from various departments because, as you know, social media crosses almost everybody and all departments in the organization. So it is in process, and it was not chosen as one of the goals and priorities when the white papers were presented. So right now we're focusing on getting those goals that were chosen, those work plans put together, and several of the same staff members are working on those right now. So stay tuned. The social media policy is in process, and it is a priority, and we'll be coming back to you as soon as we can.
And what, just to set expectations, are we talking months?
I would say that we're talking we should have at least a good component, the component that's relevant to council and your use of social media policy. We're trying to get that this summer to you.
Okay. And then I see Councilmember Kick, raise your hand. If I could just say this, I'd like to, if possible, wrap this up with reiterating the comments I just made. Let's be cognizant, stay focused, stay nonpartisan, and consistent with our policy. And that if the social media policy is coming back this summer, that may be sufficient that we kind of hang in there until then. Here's the other thing that I would suggest is that when something of real importance is happening and that we feel that one of us or more thinks that we need to weigh in on, that we agendize it and get clear on what we want to say. So with that, Councilmember Kick.
Poor choice of words. I didn't mean to say if. I knew they were working on it. So I know it's taking time. I wasn't trying to slight staff.
Oh, good. And of course, it was yourself because you're on the subcommittee. So with that, on this item 3, is there one other piece perhaps that you want to bring up, staff?
Not for that particular agenda item, Mr. Mayor, and I do appreciate the conversation and your setting expectations and your shared expectations, so thank you for that. I will be brief. I've got about another 3 minutes to walk through, one of which is just to review, again, your rules of procedure. The types of meetings aren't quote-unquote meetings for the purposes of the Brown Act. Those are, again, City Council subcommittees. Those are subcommittees that are comprised of less than a quorum of the city council members and have no other members, whether staff or from the public. So it's only 2 council members on that. Have limited subject matter and limited duration. So those are not considered meetings for the purpose of the Brown Act. Wolf briefings as well. Those are the individual briefings by council members and staff to share information about the operations of the city, answer questions about what's going on. Those 2 are not considered meetings for the purposes of the Brown Act. Obviously, in both situations, we have to make sure it's less than a quorum and that ideas are not shared between council members who are not part of those briefings or meetings. So we are very circumspect about that to make sure we don't inadvertently run afoul of Brown Act. Also, there was a conversation we had at a recent meeting, which was a desire to craft a letter possibly by signature by all council members. This is with regard to a bill that was making its way through the California legislature. In that situation, obviously, the organization needs to be nimble and move quickly. Respecting the Brown Act, again, is built for transparency, not efficiency, and sometimes legislation mandates efficiency. We brought a legislative platform back to the City Council, so they've given direction to staff. If it's within these parameters, staff can send a update or a request on behalf of the organization. If, however, the council wanted to craft a letter for its own signatures that they can each sign as council members, there is a process for that. That would be, again, placing that on an agenda for a future meeting, so you could all then wordsmith that particular letter and lend your name to it. But I just want to manage expectations that that is not as nimble as we would like to be, but just begin managing expectations between the Brown Act and how we interact and what is and is not a Brown Act meeting. So I wanted to go through that. If there are no questions, I will go through one last item and wrap up my part of the presentation this evening.
I have one question on that. Is perhaps a way to go through that. We do, as you pointed out, have the legislative agenda. We've already agreed on everything. But there are times when we have to be nimble. And I know that many times people write and say they want a letter of support for this or that. And the standard, when those kind of emails come into me or requests, it goes to city staff to say, is this consistent with the legislative agenda? And then the decision is made as to whether to write the letter or not. And then as to whether it's from an individual or the council, the city kind of thing. So we have that process. So I think what you just described is amenable to that as well. The situation where something comes in that's not within, excuse me, our legislative agenda that we've already thought about is, I think, rare. So if there's some council member that does see something that wants that action needs to be taken, I would suggest that they run that through. I think is it Christine Martin who handles that in point, and that and again it's still consistent with the Brown Act. If there's some issue, then further that I could then be looped into it if there needs further consideration. But it's my experience is that city staff is quite capable of properly interpreting the legislative agenda. So hopefully that was helpful. Anyway, continue.
That is, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. And as the legislative platform does return to you and the City Council for adoption, we can include that direction in that resolution. So it's clear that if there's something that's off book, that's not currently contemplated by the legislative agenda, that the council does delegate to you the authority to sign a platform letter on behalf of the City of Livermore. So we can include that in that item.
In conjunction with the particular council member that is concerned about the issue. Let's just get another mind in there if we can.
Okay. We'll do that. That may present some challenges with regard to, again, if you get to 3, that's would we require to be agenda.
Don't want to get to 3. Delegate the authority to me, but I'll work with one other if possible.
I like that. I like that a lot. We can leave that discretion to you. So we'll work on that when the legislative platform returns to you. Thank you very much. The last item I have to wrap this evening is, again, just to highlight the last component of your rules of procedure, which is your direction to your advisory bodies. The direction you have to your advisory bodies is to conform their individual advisory body rules to mirror and conform to your council rules. Obviously, there's some changes that need to be made to their unique structure, the way they name their officials, their makeup of their body, how many are a quorum, but the general expectation is that they will follow suit with your rules of procedure, that they would follow Rosenberg's. We will need to modify the ordinance when this comes back. We will do that. There is one item, which is the use of teleconference. In a normal universe, and prior to COVID, the City Council had not extended that authority to the advisory bodies to make sure that they were present and accounted for at the meetings, and that rule still continues to exist in your existing rules. Doesn't allow them to create standing committees, which are ongoing subject matter jurisdiction, but they are allowed to create ad hoc, limited subject matter jurisdiction, limited duration, based on less than a quorum of their body, so they're able to do that. The chair does work with the liaison when there's matters initiated to make sure it's within the purview of their scope as an advisory body, and that there's sufficient staff time to work on it. If the project would take roughly more than 8 hours worth of time, that would be presented by the advisory body back to you as the City Council to approve that action item, that work program, before they can take action on it. That way, we make sure they're fulfilling their responsibility to you as an advisory body, as well as if they have something that's of interest to them, making sure it's of interest to you before they're charged in utilizing staff resources for that project. And also does set forth your expectation that they appear before you annually and provide an update on what they've been working on. So I just want to make sure that you are aware that those are reflected in your rules of procedure, because we didn't get to that back in February. And with that, absent any questions, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, a real quick question. I want to make sure I understood what you said about the advisory body's ability to convene virtually, or could you say that again, please?
Correct. So in the past, again, I'm going to talk about a world that existed pre-COVID, which is a body pursuant to the Brown Act and the Government Code. Any legislative body member has the ability to appear telephonically or electronically for a meeting. That creates some challenges for the staff liaison supporting the advisory bodies. It increases their resource demand. But also, what we saw in practice by other organizations, it did tend to diminish the accountability. The advisory body says, "Oh, I can take this on the road." No, you have to, in order to meet the agenda requirements that existed at that time, you had to post the location they would be participating from, allow the public to participate from that location, and so that presented a number of administrative challenges. So that opportunity was not passed through to the advisory body members. That still exists in your rules here today. Obviously, the state legislature may ask and answer that question for us, and if that's the case, we would return to you, because that would have a greater resource demand, and Mark would present that to you as far as what that would entail. But right now, the rules, we have not adjusted that particular aspect of them, but I want to highlight that for you, because obviously it is an area of concern. During COVID, that rule has been suspended, so they can participate electronically, but post the emergency, returning back to our normal, absent further direction from council, they would not be able to utilize teleconferencing.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that for a while, unfortunately.
Correct. I would anticipate we'll be revisiting this conversation sometime either late this year or early next year.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kick.
Jason, you and I have discussed the opportunity to refer back to our norms and values in our rules and procedure. You know, it's later on the agenda, but there's something on the agenda later that I think it would be important for us to maybe add a section to 16.2 that said something like members of advisory body are to adhere to the norms and values set forth by the council. Is that possible to add?
If that's the will of the council, I do believe we make reference to the norms and values. I just have this right now, it's listed in your rules, it's Rule 18. It simply acknowledges that the city council has adopted city council norms and values that guide their interactions among each other. So that's a separate section. If you wanted to provide that or impose that upon the advisory bodies, that they also conform their relationships to follow your norms and values, we can definitely add that into the advisory body section, which is
16.2.
yes. We can do that. If that's a desire.
I would make a motion to add that language in at some point.
Definitely not a motion. At this point, this is just direction to council, direction from council to staff.
This is direction. I'm requesting backup from my fellow council members if they think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I think you got 5. Okay. So we will add that as well. We'll craft this section 6.2, the direction to citizens, boards, commissions, and committees to also follow the city council's norms and values. So we'll add that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Mayor, that concludes my presentation this evening.
Okay, and I don't, I see Councilmember Kick, you still got your hand up, but okay, we're good. I think you got through it, and I really appreciate the amount of work you put into that. And I think we've got a good set. So thank you. So with that, I think we're on to now item 3.2. Now, just before we get into it, I want to just set people's time expectations. We normally take a break 2 hours in and would intend to do that tonight. You know, we're a little bit loose on the time frame, but do we have a sense, given what you just saw on 3.1, does staff have a sense of how long 3.2 will go?
Honorable Mayor, it's your city manager. This one really will come down to your 2 members of the council who worked on this have created a complete product. And if the council is comfortable with that complete product, it could be over very quickly. If there are significant concerns about items in there, it could be a little longer. So,
okay, you've answered it. And so I just wanted to set expectations for people that in the event it's short, what I would do is, that'll be, within a few minutes of 7. So if it's short, we'll kind of break, around the 7 time frame, and will be a 15-minute break, and then we'll pick up a special meeting item, agenda item 4. So I just want to set that, but time between the time we finish this discussion and the time we pick up 4, will take 15 minutes. Some of us can finish their dinner, I guess, and then we'll do that. So I don't want to short the discussion on our norms and values because they're extremely important, just like our rules of procedure. But I just wanted everyone to kind of have a sense of the flow of the timing. So, okay, 3.2 and the staff report.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Mark Roberts, your city manager. I'm going to introduce Christine Martin, your deputy city manager, who's going to just give a very quick introduction to the item.
Thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. I'm Christine Martin, your Deputy City Manager, and the item before you now is the Norms and Values document. It is the City Council's document, and as you'll recall, on February 1st at your workshop, the Council did review the existing norms and values, And at that time, council provided feedback on revisions and created a focus group consisting of Councilmember Kick and Councilmember Bonanno to further refine the document and return for council consideration. So that is what is before you this evening. Council members Kick and Bonanno have worked to refine the document and incorporate feedback provided on February 1st. What is included in your packet is are 3 attachments. One is the existing norms and values as of February 1st. The second is a red line version of the changes. And then a third is a clean copy should all the revisions be accepted. That would be the document and what it would look like. There were several areas that received substantive edits, and those are outlined in your staff report. I'll name just a couple of them. The council members added a vision statement. They eliminated content that they felt had qualifying statements to kind of keep things more direct and concise. And just as a last example, they've added a section on city attorney responsibility to go with the council and staff responsibility and the council and city manager responsibility sections. So with that, I do know that our council members are prepared to give you a little more background on what they were doing when the thinking behind their revisions, to be more concise, and to discuss that with you this evening. But staff is available to take any direction that you have on this item.
Okay, looks like Councilmember Bonanno is going to take us through it.
Well, I will kick it off, and then I will certainly let Councilmember Kick add her input to this. So first, I'd like to thank Ms. Martin for her help facilitating our work. She was very helpful in helping us stay on track and just really good glue between us. I think also it was great working with Councilmember Kick on this. This was sort of my first assignment. So I thought we did a very nice job together, and we complemented each other well, I think. So I guess the only maybe 2 quick things I wanted to say. We added a vision statement, which is new. And so that's not to be taken lightly. We did our best to include the things that we thought were important to reflect the community's vision. You know, it's not the 2 council members' vision, it's everyone's vision. And so I would hope that we would get comment on that in particular. As Ms. Martin said, we tried to clean things up, make them a little tighter, a little more direct, change some words that we thought either were a little bit mystifying or, redundant. And the last thing I'll mention, so, and we gave you a summary, which hopefully will help you see where we've made, even somewhat substantial, significant changes. So the last thing, though, is this document is really more than, it's called the norms and values. I mean, it's always contained more than that. It's contained the mission, it contains the norms and values, it contains the council responsibilities, staff responsibilities, principles of governance. So not that we have to wordsmith the title of this document, but it either should be broken up into a few, like the mission, vision, mission, and core values, and the norms maybe, and the responsibilities could be separate. I don't want to proliferate documents, but I do think we should be clear about what this is and what it contains a little bit more precisely. So I'm very interested in all of your comments, and I'll just leave it there then.
Okay, Councilmember Kick, do you want to add anything?
So I have some things I want to talk about, but I would like to get feedback from the rest of you first, because I've already given you my feedback on this by working on it with Councilmember Bonanno.
Okay, great. There was a lot of work, and really appreciate what you guys have done there. Vice Mayor Monroe.
So this document made me incredibly happy to read. I really, really liked it. And just thank you to Council members Kick and Bonanno. Thank you to Ms. Martin. That's fantastic. I really, really enjoyed reading it. It's like, oh yes, I wish I thought of that. They put it in there. Great. I appreciate Councilmember Bonanno's comments on norms and values, the statement of that not really expressing what this does. I don't actually have better language, but sure, I agree. I do have one problem that I wanted to mention, and this has only come to my attention through working on the Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee, and that is, what does equity mean? Through working on that, I've come to realize that, first of all, I had to think really hard if I was going to come up with a definition of it. I knew what it meant, but there's a difference between knowing what it means and having it, and knowing and being able to express that. So that was one. And number two, if I was having trouble with it, all the more so people, who haven't been thinking about this. So I would like to figure out a way to include a definition. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I'm an academic. You stick a little asterisk there at the bottom, you put a footnote, it all works. I'm not sure that works here. But I will say that this is a definition I found that could work wherever it would go. Equity means ensuring the best environment possible so that community members and visitors have the access each person needs to survive or succeed based on where they are and where they want to go. That may include, but it's not limited to, access to opportunity, networks, resources, and supports. Now, some of that is in the vision statement. So I don't know. I'm sure it could be less wordy. I did take some of this bits and pieces from others. I do not want to claim credit for this, the wording. But something along those, I think, needs to be there to more clearly define the word that we think is important.
Councilmember Kick.
Gina and I had this exact conversation of, do we define equity or do people get it? And we went, people get it. So, if that's the suggestion, is that we define what commitment to equity means, we could absolutely do that. Any other feedback from other council members?
I see Councilmember Carling.
Yeah, I don't think people get it. So I think the definition could be shorter, yes, Vice Mayor, but I think that's a reasonable thing to do. I appreciate the work that you folks have put into this. I understand your point, Councilmember Bonanno, about proliferating documents, but this is going to be put on the web, right? So I'm not sure. Seems to me it'd be clearer if we had, sort of a title the way you have it now, and maybe another one on responsibilities or something. I'll let you guys figure out how to do that, but I don't think there's a danger, if you will, of proliferating documents, because these are all going to exist electronically, and I think it'd be clearer for the public to find the ones they if the right words are in the title. Today I was looking for norms and values and on the website, and I typed that in, and I think the first four things had to do with the airport or something, and it was a little perplexing to me as to why I had to scroll down so far. And so anyway, I think obviously there are improvements to be made in the website, but I guess I don't object to additional electronic devices if they accurately describe the material that somebody was trying to find. But yes, include equity definition.
Okay, I'll say a couple of words here. I do think a definition is good. And starting out with the words that what you need in order to survive, that took me aback a little bit because it sounds a little dire. So I think there's a shorter definition that's less so severe. I think that in my experience in the corporate world, you have vision, mission, and values is kind of a one set. You see people that have pyramids and they have whatever things, right? But that's a something that everybody kind of has as a company, and you can go to any company and go on their website, you can ask for their mission, vision, values, and you'll get it. The other piece that we have here, though, are norms, which in some ways are a further drill down on our values and really kind of makes them more living document. So I could see separating that out possibly, but the mission, vision, and values, that's a one block that I think is a related chunk. So I would say that if I could, and I'm looking at the up here at the beginning, just minor wordsmithing, but just something to toss out there. Strong public service philosophy. And you normally think of philosophers as kind of like not doing anything, but opining, right? But there is something about strong, you've got commitment to equity, but it's and I know you didn't want to do it twice, but it's a strong public service or mindset, or we deliver strong public service or something anyway. I'm just thinking philosophy is a little not going to be strong enough for what we're trying to convey there. Other than that, the other thing, the question is, you did kind enough to put together the little summary of the key things that you revised here. Are you going to step through each of those real quickly? Is that also the plan here?
Wasn't the plan.
It was, you say?
Was not the plan, or at least it wasn't my plan. unless Commissioner-
I would just request, just for not just ourselves, but we do have members of the public watching, and
Yeah,
it would be
I
helpful.
I will do that when I get the rest of your feedback.
Okay, so let me switch to Councilmember Bonanno at this point.
Yeah, let me just comment a little bit on your comments. So the breaking up multiple documents, I think that's the right approach. I think that with regard to equity, we could, in the commitment to equity value, have a shorter definition that maybe we could work on together, or maybe Ms. Martin could help us do that. But I think it would be best to, before we say we're committed to equity, let's say what we think equity is, and then say we're committed to it. So that would be a way to handle that. The breaking up of the document, and we have vision statement, mission statement, core values, that kind of applies to everybody. We hope it applies to the public, it applies to city, electeds, commissioners, advisory boards, and our staff. Then you get down to what's labeled city council norms and city council values. And then we have principles of governance along with relationships. So we just have to decide where we draw that line. I agree, the typical vision, mission, and value statement goes together. It just seems like everything else then would go into a second document. That's what I would recommend.
And the second document is the one that's really correlated with our rules of procedure.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, that's the close association there, not so much the mission, vision, values kind of thing.
Agree.
Okay. So I think at this point, it sounds like everybody is appreciating this document and all the work you did, but I think it would be worth a quick little bit of description of what you
I'll walk through that right now.
Did here.
Okay, so we added a vision statement. That was something we didn't have before, and I haven't heard any negative feedback on that, so I'm assuming y'all are good with it. We added a core value, which was a commitment to equity. The rest of them were either already there and we just changed some wording. We added commitment to equity, I think because of the things that have happened the last year. We have this equity inclusion subcommittee. We should add it to this permanent document. Now we will add a definition to equity. A lot of the things that we did was try and make it sound like one person wrote it. There were some cadence and language choices that seemed maybe disjointed, but we tried to cut that down, clear it up. We removed redundancies in multiple locations. So there was, sometimes things were literally repeated word for word in separate spots, and we just tried to streamline and clean that up. We were very happy to get it to 3 pages. There is something that, you know, I'll be suggesting that we add, which will get it to 4, and that's a bummer to me because we worked hard on that 3 pages, but that's okay.
Use a smaller font.
Yeah, we'll use a smaller font. We changed, we added a council value. So under values, we added data-driven decision-making, and we added teamwork. So, you know, just, I think these are things that we have discussed with each other at some point, but our policy decisions are data-driven. We rely on fact-based evidence, and we're not gonna, you know, make our decisions based on assumptions, and that we work as a team to create effective policy. And this was really important to me. I think I've been welcomed into this team, and I wanted that written down, that Livermore is a city that works as a team. We're not in here for our own political gain. We're in here because we want to do what's best for the community, and we're going to work together to do that. And then we changed some.
If I may.
Oh,
if
sure.
I may. So we go through this thing on the team is important. And that means that isn't means 5-0 votes. What it means is that we know we are respectful of each other, but we understand we're on a team, so that we can disagree and strongly disagree on things. But once the vote is taken, we move on.
Yes, I
and
agree
together as a team. I mean, is that a way to phrase this, some sense of what you were saying there?
Right. We're focused on the best outcomes for the community as a whole, not on each of our individual goals or opinions. And I think, you know, you can see in our council norms where we talk about demonstrating respect and taking responsibility, where, you know, it's okay that it says we will be respectful, including situations with and especially disagreement and difference. But we're going to focus on forward thinking, building on history and lessons learned from the past, and, you know, not take our past disagreements to the next meeting with us. We're just going to stay forward thinking.
Okay, Vice Mayor Monroe would like to say something at this point.
Yeah, I'm really struck by this as well. And there's a couple of things that showed up in this discussion that I wanted to know. One is I would love to see this turned around so that what you really, because you've emphasized best, Councilmember Kick, you've emphasized best outcome for the community first. I think that that overarching piece could be first. We strive for that, and therefore we work as a team and we put our individual interests last, or, you know, we are not focused on ourselves as an individual. But flipping that, I think, really highlights the outcomes for the community.
Sure, that's a simple sentence framework change, and so.
And you don't have to have too small a font.
I'll just do some arrows flipping there.
Right. So then the other question I have, is just occurring to me, is this where is it that we talk about the fact that even though we're coming from districts, we're working for the whole?
So that is in the principles of governance, which
Page 3.
Yeah, it's, well, it's on my page too. It says the city council will govern on an at-large basis to address the needs of the entire community. Resources will be allocated based on community-wide priorities. To ensure community-wide focus, city council members and residents may communicate directly, regardless of the district the council member represents or the district where the community member lives. So just to,
so the only thing I was suggesting is that this concept of the team and that may want to be as closely juxtaposed as you can, perhaps.
we can switch teamwork and enthusiasm and effort, and they will literally be one right after the other. So
just a suggestion.
Good thoughts.
Yeah, let me just add one quick thing.
Sure.
The paragraph that Councilmember Kick just read, that's our introduction to, I mean, that really is our principle of governance. That is directly under the title Principles of Governance, and there's things that are derivative of that, but that we felt like was very important to say boldly and emphatically up front before we, you know, go through the different types of relationships. So I think we all agree with that it needs to be very clearly stated.
Mm-hmm. We also changed enthusiasm to enthusiasm and effort, just to remind us that we expect all of each other to come to meetings well prepared, ready to discuss. You know, there's been stories that in the past, sometimes they would open their binders and the papers would fall out, meaning they didn't read the packet. But we never do that because we're focused on coming prepared to work.
And we get it electronically.
Yeah, that way you can never know if we're unprepared. No, I think we expect good things from each other and we will do good things. And then we combined some values just because they were redundant. And then what I want to talk about mostly is that when I was thinking about this document and how it could be used, is the community can use this, but also just kind of to refer to us as like a very quick Cliff's Notes guide to what it means to be on council. And so having these, what your job entails and how should you do it. So council staff relations talks about our council responsibility, the staff's responsibility, and we added a section which is the city attorney responsibility. We did not write that section because we felt the city attorney would be better at writing what his responsibility is, so that it's very clear to anybody coming in that this is how the city functions and works. These are the goals that they aspire to, and this is how they get it done. And there is something that we want to add to this after some recent events, and that would be council advisory body relations. So here's my suggestion. I suggest that we let Christine take the final wording on this. I've talked to her a little bit about if she would be comfortable writing what is that role. Very simple, basic, saying, you know, saying what it already says in our rules and procedures, that advisory bodies are, you know, appointed by the council, serve at the pleasure of the council, and you can find more information in the rules and procedure. And just kind of referring back to each other. Jason talked to me about how it's important that these documents refer back to one another. So I think then we could say this document pretty much has all the different kinds of relationships laid out in a very clear and concise way. So there's no question from anyone how things are supposed to work and what is expected of them.
Okay, well, I thank you for taking us through the highlight summary. I think that was useful. Any other comments at this point? Because I think we may be, I will be asking staff, do we have sufficient direction for you at this point on this?
Honorable
Yes, you do. Oh, yes.
And I guess the one issue there was that there was concurrence on the the reference to advisory committees. Is that correct?
Sure. I mean, I can see Vice Mayor Monroe raised her hand. That must have been yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're all good on that, is what I heard, assumed. But you're right. Thank you for asking that to be explicit. Any other final comments? Otherwise, I think we're ready to conclude this item. Councilmember Kick.
I just wanted to clarify expectations. So Gina Bonanno, Councilmember Bonanno, and I will talk to Christine about a couple of these sentence changes. Let Christine do the final language on the council advisory body relations, and then it will come back to us at a later date for final approval. Not a whole bunch more discussion, just ratifying this document. Is that correct? Am I getting that right, Mark Roberts?
Sounds good.
Could be on a consent calendar, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much. That was a lot of hard work and a great job. So thank you. Much appreciated, along with what the city attorney did on the item 3.1. And everyone else who worked on it. I think it's very good. And I'm glad that we take it seriously enough that we spent this time on it. So I conclude this item, and that concludes our first meeting of tonight. And I said we'd take a 15-minute break. It looks like it's 6:55. So we'll come back for the next special meeting item, agenda item 4 at 7:10. We'll sign out. Okay, thank you. Hey, Gina, I don't know if you can hear me, but something's gone wrong with your image there.
I'm working on that. I've had it happen before. I don't know why. I'm gonna try to re-pick my background. Just give me a second. What? Very strange.
Okay, City Clerk, are you going to give us the countdown when we're ready to go again?
Mayor, it is 7:10. I believe we are ready.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're into the second special meeting of tonight, and it's agenda item 4.1. I'll read the agenda item and the recommendation, and then I'll give a few framing comments about how I envision this process to go. So agenda item 4.1, City Council to take action in response to Planning Commissioner John Stein's comments at the April 20th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting, up to and including his removal from the Planning Commission. And the recommendation, I want to read this because I think it's very important. At its regular meeting on April 26, 2021, the City Council expressed its disappointment with Planning Commissioner John Stein and his insensitive comments at the April 20th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. After discussion, the City Council found that Commissioner Stein's comments were not reflective of the City Council's values and its commitment to a culture of welcome, inclusion, and respect. The City Council requested this item to be placed on a special meeting agenda for May 3rd, 2021, to take the action it deems appropriate in response to Planning Commissioner John Stein's comments at the April 2021 Planning Commission meeting, up to and including his removal from the Planning Commission. So to begin with, I want to make some framing comments, and they'll be both as my role as the presiding officer and personally as a voting member of this council. Now, first, as the presiding officer, I'd like to describe the process we're going to follow for this agenda item. I will make these framing comments, and then after mine, ask if any other council member would like to do so as well. Then Commissioner Stein will be allowed to make a statement if he wishes to do so. I will open the public comment period, and after the public comment period, I will then bring the item back to the council to begin deliberations. Now, here are some framing comments as a presiding officer. Much of what I said last week regarding the Planning Commission's decision regarding the Eden housing proposal pertains for this agenda item as well tonight. Our deliberations are about Commissioner Stein's comments, not about the technical decision-making regarding the Eden project. The Eden project will be coming before the council on the 24th of this month, and it would be inappropriate for the council to discuss the technical aspects of the decision before the council has received the agenda packet and has had a chance to understand the key legal and design code aspects. It is especially important for council members not to say anything that could possibly compromise their ability to participate fully on the 24th. And in our earlier session, the city attorney was answering some questions from a council member as to the complexity of getting ahead of ourselves. And so the idea is we're not going to. Therefore, any comments about the Eden housing vote by the Planning Commission should be held, this is by any comments by the public, until citizens forum on the 10th. And it would be in the forum because on the 10th, none of it is on the agenda, or when it is on the agenda, when the Eden proposal comes before the council on the 24th. I hope that's clear. As to my personal perspective, no one has called for Commissioner Stein's removal based on his decision. All of the comments I have received have focused solely on his language and comparisons. I suggest to my fellow council members that we do not be distracted by efforts to hijack our proceedings tonight by anyone referencing the quality of Commissioner Stein's or any other commissioner's decision-making with regard to the Eden project. To me, this is about whether Commissioner Stein understands the issues raised as to our values regarding equity and inclusion, and if he has sincerely apologized and can learn from the situation. So that's my personal belief on this. And I'm going to then ask if anyone else on the council has additional framing comments. And I see the council member Kick, followed by Vice Mayor Monroe, followed by Council Member Bonanno, would also like to say a few words before we offer the opportunity for Commissioner Stein to speak. So, Council Member Kick.
So in framing, I'm framing this as a public trust issue. I feel that public trust has been broken throughout this process. So this is not just about Commissioner Stein's behavior. It's about ensuring that we maintain and rebuild trust from the people who elected us. They need to trust that we appoint the best people for the job. They expect us to prepare those people for success, help support them if they struggle, and hold them accountable if they cause harm to the community. So the conversation I would like to have after we hear public comment is about what accountability looks like. And I have some thoughts and actions items that I believe are a step in the right direction. And when looking into this issue, I realized there's some problems of how we prepare our advisory bodies. And I just wanted to let people know that I think in our last 2 agenda items, we may have started to repair some of the mistakes that we as a council and a city had made in preparing people that work with us on our team. So I want to hear what the public has to say, but I just wanted to be clear about my framing on how I'm viewing the discussion moving forward.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Monroe.
Well, so over the past few days, I've received many emails. I've talked with a lot of people, including Mr. Stein, and I reflected on my own and council's actions with regard to Mr. Stein's comments on April 20th. And so that frames these preliminary comments. First of all, Mr. Stein's comments were hurtful. He recognized that. He took full responsibilities for those actions, both in what I would consider to be a fairly clumsy oral apology, but then in a clear written public apology. When I spoke with him in preparation for this meeting, he expressed willingness to do whatever council asked to repair the damage. I'm persuaded that Mr. Stein's words did not reflect either his goals or values for improving Livermore, but were truly a matter of poor communication. Nevertheless, those words caused real harm that must be remedied. Second, Mr. Stein is a person, not a symbol. I've known him for decades, and though I've often disagreed with him, I've never doubted his integrity, his willingness to stand for what he believes come what may, or his commitment to making the world a better place. Again, that does not excuse his words or actions. It is to remind all of us that what we discuss here tonight are the actions of a particular person in a particular role. And third, compassion and consequences are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, we are all better when we have both. Last week, I heard people say that intent doesn't matter, only impact. That's nonsense. Our legal system regularly takes both intent and impact into account. Everyone makes mistakes. Those with integrity want the chance to fix those mistakes. If you expect that for yourself, know that opportunity must be given to everyone. That isn't to say that it's easy. It means that a genuine apology, amends for harm done, learning from the mistake, and doing better in the future are all necessary. 4 steps, every one of them counts. If that's what we want for ourselves, we should do no less for others. And finally, Mr. Stein is not a symbol, though many have used him that way. What is the issue that caused him to be turned into a symbol? It's not the use of the word ghetto, hurtful as that word is. Vocabulary is easy to change, and it's not even affordable housing. Rather, the ways people have reacted to both the word ghetto and to affordable housing speak to a desire to include or exclude particular groups of people. Many of the emails that I've received say that the council should dismiss should the council dismiss Mr. Stein, we would be engaging in cancel culture. Further, these emails go on, Mr. Stein got it right. Those people will live in that housing. Let me be clear. Mr. Stein himself disagrees with these so-called defenders and has said so in The Independent. Nevertheless, his words at the Planning Commission gave cover for those engaging in another type of cancel culture, canceling, that is rejecting the kinds of people these writers deem other. The ongoing debate about affordable housing here in Livermore is not fundamentally about buildings, but about the economic class of the people who live there. Rejecting people because of their income, that's cancel culture. I regularly hear from Livermore residents who are taunted because of what they wear, the languages they speak, the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, and more. Rejecting people because they're different, that is council culture. At Council Member Kick's first meeting, members of the public questioned whether she was allowed to hold office because she was a renter. The city attorney had to confirm in public that in fact renters can hold office. Assuming that only homeowners can hold public office, that is cancel culture. One of the emails sent to council explained that Mr. Stein should get a pass for using the word ghetto because he was Jewish and therefore must have been referring to the 16th century Venetian ghettos or World War II ghettos. That usage implies that Jews are unfamiliar with 20th century American history because they are Jews. Assuming that because he is Jewish, a planning commissioner would not understand the meaning of ghetto in the American context, that is cancel culture. That email, by the way, was unintentionally personal since, like Mr. Stein, I am Jewish. And yeah, it hurt. Tonight, we are going to discuss one specific person. I hope we can do so with respect and humility. In the weeks and months to come, we will be discussing how we include people, not cancel them. And as we do so, I hope we can recognize ourselves in the faces and voices of others to become a more welcoming Livermore for every person. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bonanno.
So first, I just want to appreciate the many messages and discussions I've had with community members over the last week. I've received many comments on both sides. There's been just a great diversity of opinion that we've all heard. So I know right out of the gate that some people will not agree with whatever decision we're going to make tonight. I think this is just part of the democratic process we're all grateful to have. So with respect to the April 20th Planning Commission meeting, I just want to say that I'll be considering only the comments Mr. Stein made about affordable housing and what these comments reflected about his opinion, his perceptions, and the hurt they may have caused. My approach tonight is going to be to listen to the public, to Mr. Stein if he chooses to speak, and to my fellow council members, and then to do what I think is in the best interest of the community overall. So with that, I'm just going to hold any further comments until after we hear from Mr. Stein and get the public's input. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, at this point, I'd like to offer Commissioner Stein the opportunity to make a statement if he desires to do so.
Mr. Stein, please unmute yourself.
Yes, I would like to make a comment. I agree with much of what the council members have said before. A number of people were hurt by my offensive comments during the last Planning Commission. To all of them, I say I am truly sorry, and I will do my best to see that it never happens again. My feelings as a person, public servant, and Livermore employee are those of acceptance and inclusivity, and that has been shown by past action. My passion is to make Livermore a great place for everyone to work, live, visit, and raise a family. Some individuals have tried to put words in my mouth and say what I believe and what my motives are. I would like to state my beliefs. People of all racial, ethnic, income level, sexual orientation, and religion, and any background are welcome in Livermore. Livermore needs a balanced mix of housing types spread throughout the city. Service workers are a valued part of the community, and people of all income levels are entitled to live in decent housing close to where they work. This issue is about my words and not my vote. This council and staff, I believe, are honestly working to do what is best for Livermore, whatever the decision. Planning should be a process and not a feud. Livermore is a melting pot, and I hope that I've helped make it that. Those are beliefs I've held since I've come to Livermore 50 years ago. And over the past few years, I've realized that there is an urgent need for affordable housing. And the only way it can be provided is through subsidized housing. The need has become more urgent over the past year or so because of the pandemic, loss of jobs, and spiraling cost of housing. I've been asked to explain why I used some words and comparisons. I think Council Member Monroe has explained that sufficiently. I thank the council for appointing me to the Planning Commission. I have found the work both interesting and rewarding. I hope you will allow me to continue. If you find that I am unfit to serve, I accept the decision. Again, to anyone who has been caused pain or that I've inflicted pain on through my words, I am sorry. I offer my sincere apologies and will make sure it doesn't happen again. Finally, I'd like to thank people for all their comments, both those who supported and comforted me and those who pointed out the offensiveness of my words and showed me where areas I can be more careful and sensitive exist. If the council has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Bob, you're on mute.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for your comments, very heartfelt. And I would suggest at this point, we'll go to public comment, and that if Commissioner Stein, if you could stick around after that, we go into deliberations, then there may be some questions at that point. Unless there's some member of the council would like to ask a question now. I don't see anyone. So now I would like to ask the city clerk's office to try and figure out how many people in the public would like to make a comment. And the reason is that if, depending on the number, will determine the amount of time we want to allocate. My own preference at this point, I've given the interest in this at the moment as we start at 2 minutes. But if the city clerk, if you could ask people to raise their hands, if you could just get a sense of how many want to comment, and then let me know, and then we'll come back and I'll make a few more comments before we begin.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. For those participating in tonight's meeting that would like to submit a verbal comment, please raise your hand now. If you are dialing in from a phone, please use the *9 feature. Mayor, I will give people just one moment to use the feature and I will give you a number.
Sure. No, I think we can give people a moment. It's always, especially if they've got a phone, trying to find *9 and everything else. So, but I do think everybody should understand that we want to hear from everybody. But I see, we've got like 60 participants in the moment. We don't want to look at 3 hours.
Mayor, currently we have 19 people that would like to submit a public comment.
Okay. I think that's manageable with our normal 3 minutes, but what has happened in the past in these meetings, especially Zoom, as we go along, people may not have raised their hands at the moment, and others get inspired by what they hear. So I think I would like to keep the comment period to 2 minutes. So I think that's appropriate. Now, before we start, I want to reiterate to the members of the public that want to comment to focus your comments on the agenda topic and not on the Eden proposal. As I said, that's going to be coming before us on the 24th and is not pertinent. I also ask that people be kind and considerate as they comment. I mean, after all, the reason we're discussing this tonight is fundamentally a discussion about how we treat each other and should treat each other. So I request that everyone be respectful and focus your comments on the words, not the person. So with that, could we begin the public comment?
Mayor, to clarify, did you say 2 minutes for public comment?
Yes, and I saw some heads bobbing on the council to agree with that.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, the first speaker will be Temp Terminal, followed by Carolyn Vasconcelos, followed by Emily Wilson. Temp Terminal, please unmute your. Temp Terminal, please unmute yourself.
There may be a technical difficulty. Why don't you go to the next one and we can come back.
Okay. The next speaker is Carolyn Vasconcelos, followed by Emily Wilson, and then we will give Temp Terminal another chance at it. Carolyn Vasconcelos, please unmute yourself.
I'm a part of two sizable Livermore congregations, one being the largest church in Livermore. I've done 40 years of volunteer work in the inner city with the poor. The city council is trying to intimidate, cancel, and silence Commissioner Stein, who held a single opposing vote, an opposing vote to the current form of the Eden housing project. As to the term ghetto, it has long been a slang word with many interpretations. In Oakland, many neighborhoods where we used to play outdoors into the late evening became ghettos in our thinking, meaning areas which are now unsafe, usually associated with drugs and crime. Eden housing projects are in some of those areas. Being born, raised, and working in Oakland from that area, I know. Livermore is heading to its own ghetto problems on Junction and North Livermore Avenue. Cars and garages, including my son's, were broken into. You worry when you parked your car and walked to your house if you were safe. My son was held up by two men with a sawed-off shotgun held to his head, then robbed and his car stolen. This happened as he got out of his car returning home from work. Surrounding apartments in that area is known and called by locals Crack Alley. That's a sign that the neighborhood right here in Livermore is a ghetto. This call for Commissioner Stein's removal we find not acceptable, discriminating, anti-Semitic. This is suppression by an attempt to silence his vote and his voice of opposition. Commissioner Stein has served Livermore with distinguishment. His statements were all very inclusive, and I have a list. Given losing a minute, I'm not going to read it. There's over thousands of signatures that he agreed with on the current form being rejected by this Save the Livermore Project. Over 100 people opposed it on the April Planning Commission. David Binder Research Surveys rejected the project 4-1. And we will not tolerate it, and we will actively and vocally come against anyone that votes to remove him.
Can we do a point of order, Mayor?
Mayor, you're on mute.
Yes, the clock was blocked in the way my things were set up. So what would you like to raise?
I just want to remind our commenters to be kind. Please do not threaten council members. And remember, we're not talking about Eden housing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The next speaker will be Emily Wilson, followed by Temp Terminal again, followed by Asa Stroud. Emily Wilson, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, Council and residents of Livermore. My name is Emily Wilson, and I am a lifelong resident of this town and one of the co-founders of Tri-Valley for Black Lives. Part of our mission is to hold our public officials accountable, and that is why I'm speaking here tonight. John Stein made classist and racist remarks at the April 20th Commissioner meeting that brought to light bigger problems from the city level down to our community members. No one who is serving our community that we are paying to serve our community should have these views on affordable housing, lower income families, and the houseless community. This behavior from someone in a position of power perpetuates systemic racism. Real harm was caused by Stein towards low-income, unhoused, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Since these comments, more and more false narratives are being perpetuated by community members defending him online and in real life. I am here to demand that we hold John Stein and the city of Livermore accountable. There is a difference between cancel culture and accountability. Saying we misunderstood the comments is not an apology, and that is not taking accountability. Intent does not matter more than the impact of what was said that caused harm. Stein must resign and take accountability for the harm he caused without excuses. Accountability looks like taking some time to learn about the impact your words and views have and repair that harm caused to those communities. This conversation and this meeting and this issue that our community is facing is much bigger than just Stein. This is about deep-rooted classism and racism that all of us have contributed to in our own ways. Stein can do better, and so can all of us here in Livermore. Thank you.
We'll give Temp Terminal another opportunity, followed by Asa Strout, followed by Jackie Coda. Temp Terminal, please unmute yourself.
It doesn't look like Temp Terminal's got connectivity here.
All right.
So let's move to the next.
The next person will be Asa Strout, followed by Jackie Coda, followed by Ian Carlin. Asa Strout, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Warner, Council, staff. Appreciate you guys taking the time to address this issue. Tonight, you are going to be hearing multiple comments deriding Commissioner Stein and not for Commissioner Stein tonight. I would also like to point out some of his comments were just factually and intellectually wrong, regardless of the intent behind the language specifically used. He used this language to in an attempt to talk about how rundown and the affordable housing is going to become. And there are multiple projects throughout the city and the Tri-Valley that show that those comments of what his stated intent are just factually incorrect. The maintenance does not become a rundown property. It's not boarded up. It's not paint peeling from the walls. These are still good projects that are holding many low-income families together into this area. Additionally, there are just multiple things that he said that were factually incorrect as well about how he said that Livermore is doing the lion's share, where there are projects that are existent today in Pleasanton with Sunflower Hill, and Dublin had just approved an affordable housing complex of 300 units. So to say that Livermore is carrying all the weight for the Tri-Valley is also factually incorrect as well. And to end it, I'd like to call out that he was worried about affordable housing being segregated to one area. My question would be, where exactly would he propose? Because there actually is no affordable housing in downtown. It is already spread out throughout the city, and downtown is one of the few areas that it's not. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the city clerk might like to comment on a process at the moment.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a reminder to our attendees, each speaker gets one comment per person per item. So if a comment was submitted in writing today, please do not also submit a verbal comment this evening in order to give everyone the opportunity to share their thoughts. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next, please.
The next speaker is Jackie Coda, followed by Ian Carlin, followed by Ali Felker. Jackie Coda, please unmute yourself.
Thank you.
We watched council chastise a man for using a word they now deem not adequate for usage in America or in a public setting. Even though it is an English word that simply describes an area of our city the commissioner didn't want to see become segregated or inhabited primarily by discrimination, while in the same sentence he supported affordable housing spread around the city. Not once did Mr. Stein mention race or religion. That was something conjured up by unconscious bias of the minds of people who use identity as a weaponized agenda and race hustlers. Does council think they are excused from their own recent labeling of community members, or have they so quickly forgotten being stumped to define their own usage of a word marginalized when they were including it in a memo describing members of our community to the Board of Supervisors? Would marginalized have been a more acceptable Orwellian newspeak for Mr. Stein to use instead? I didn't call for a special session to have you removed from office. Is calling members of our community marginalized reflective of the city's council's core values and its commitment to culture of welcome, inclusion, and respect? It was quite clear from listening to the entire conversation. Mr. Stein asked very appropriate, concerning questions regarding the project, and his comments had no objectionable intent. But our council decided to spend over an hour berating the commissioner over the use of one word, even after the commissioner apologized for being misunderstood, for he clearly had nothing to apologize for. He did nothing wrong. We will sit back and watch the hypocrisy of your next move. If you decide to remove someone for using a word, be prepared to make a list of all unacceptable words for the city and staff, so we are all clear which ones are acceptable today and tomorrow, so no one falls into your trap of unconscious bias and bigoted assumptions. The community will look forward to that list being published publicly. It's a hyperactive knee-jerk reaction to some people nowadays to label everything as a racial offense, and it's getting tiresome, doing detriment to our community. The way I see it, you owe Mr. Stein an apology for assuming he meant something he did not and dragging him through the distressing council meeting unnecessarily. Just like I'm almost certain you didn't mean anything bigoted by calling members of our community marginalized. It was clear there was no ill intent in Mr. Stein's comments about the specific community member, race, religion, and to assume so is to reveal one's own bias. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ian Carlin, followed by Ali Felker, followed by James Hutchinson. Ian Carlin, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Council. You have a hard and difficult meeting ahead of you, and I am glad I am not in your shoes. Thinking back on the last week, it's, the challenge here is that what the comments that John Stein made have unleashed is a group of people who now are using these terms openly and hostilely to describe various areas of the city, as we've heard by the first commenter today, and in ways that fail to appreciate the history and context of how Livermore became how it is. Livermore was redlined. In that context, these words start to mean that the commissioner potentially wants to keep Livermore redlined. History is important to understand, and you would be mistaken to ignore it. Now, whether John Stein stays or goes is in your hands, but the thing is, you need to make sure that racially coded language, racially coded bias, classist language, classist bias, and terms that have been used as dog whistles for decades. This is not something that's come up recently. Saying those people, or we don't want people like that in our town, or other phrases that are very similar to what John Stein said, are derogatory and have been derogatory since the Nixon administration. We really need to make it clear that civility must reign in town, whether John Stein is removed or whether the council believes he is truly remorseful, because the impact of his words has already been felt, no matter what the intent was. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ian Carlin, followed by Ali Felker, followed by James Hutchins. Ian Carlin, please unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Ali Felker. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Good evening, everyone. I also do not envy the job that you have ahead of you. I also just wanted to point out that this is not just the word ghetto that was the problem. You know, it really was these comments that showed there was an implicit bias towards different people groups and them coming and living in our town. And I really do appreciate Stein's comments tonight. Commissioner Stein, I do appreciate your use of what you do believe in instead of what you don't believe in. That has had an impact on me. Unfortunately, I have had personal negative experience with a planning department. However, this was at a county level. And I know what it's like for things to not be put through because of an implicit opinion or a preconceived notion on behalf of somebody who is an official, whether they're elected or appointed. And so it brings a fear and sort of a distrust in my own heart, because the people who are our officials who are planning and, you know, actually saying whether or not they have the recommendations for these projects, you know, need to be able to look inside and see if they have implicit bias towards a group of people. So a level of trust has been broken. I do appreciate the comments that were made tonight, and I don't particularly know which direction would be good to resolve this. However, I do think that trust needs to be rebuilt with the community. I also would like to see a clarification on the roles and responsibilities of a planning commissioner in this city, and just to understand that a little bit more, I think would be helpful for the public and at least for myself. I thank you guys for the opportunity to speak tonight, and I hope that this is resolved quickly and kindly.
The next speaker is James Hutchins, followed by Isaiah Campbell, followed by Joe Higashi. James Hutchins, please unmute yourself.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stein has been a public servant for 43 years representing Livermore, including as a member of the City Council. Now on the Planning Commission, he has acted as a watchdog on the boards on which he has sat, which has gained him respect from many and contempt from others for which would not, who would rather not have oversight. The commissioner is here on trial for the discussion about the dynamics involved in the downtown housing projects. He stated multiple times that he is for affordable inclusive housing, but was concerned that by putting all of the low-income housing together, namely segregated, that would cause stigma. But now he's being called classist for discussing such issues. This man grew up in a low economic situation himself, is now being called classist because based on his lived experience, he wanted to avoid that. But today's environment has made it difficult or impossible to discuss these things. The commissioner said Livermore has become the center of homelessness in the Tri-Valley. According to the 2019 Alameda County report, Livermore had 86% of the Tri-Valley's homeless in 2017 and 77% in 2019. So was Stein wrong that Livermore is the center of homelessness in the Tri-Valley, or was he wrong for stating a fact? Likewise, he's being called classist for saying that he didn't want the low-income housing to be seen as a ghetto. A ghetto is defined by being where people live due to lack of choice, like being the only place they can afford. That is exactly what Eden housing is designed for people that can't afford to live elsewhere. He even said that is why he feels it's better for the affordable housing to be integrated into the market rate projects, exactly to avoid the stigma. When it's deemed offensive to discuss an issue, lest somebody be offended, then how are we ever to address them? If you cannot talk about a problem, it will just continue. Intent does matter. Stein advocated to address issues, not perpetuate them. He did not intend to offend anyone, and to remove him for his words and voicing concerns is to silence a caring and honest person of integrity who represented and supported Livermore for decades. Thank you.
The next speaker is Isaiah Campbell, followed by Joe Higashi, followed by Travis Cox. Isaiah Campbell, please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Isaiah Campbell. I'm an educator and longtime resident of the Livermore community. Though the comment was a mistake, I think people keep talking about the word ghetto, so I think I want to start by defining the word. A ghetto is a often slum-like part of a city that's primarily occupied by one or more minority groups. Historically, between the differences of education and the pushing of minority groups into labor-based jobs, we've seen that these groups are often most affected by massive unemployment. And during this pandemic, we've seen that this trend continues even more dramatically, while many have been losing their jobs. So for this reason, there are many members of lower income and underserved communities who identify as one or more minority groups. The comment made by John Stein, his apology, as well as the uproar that it has inspired within the community have expressed two main things to me. First, that only certain kinds of people will be welcomed and advertised to for the low income housing, namely non-minority groups, to avoid becoming a ghetto. Second, there is no intention of promoting upward mobility of those in need of affordable housing and no intention of avoiding or improving the harsh conditions that are often associated with these places. So for that reason, I agree with sentiments that these remarks were racist, that they were classist, and I agree that John Stein should resign. Let's make Livermore an inclusive and accepting community. Thank you.
The next speaker is Joe Higashi, followed by Travis Cox, followed by Fong. Joe Higashi, please unmute yourself.
Hello. I personally do not agree with Mr. John Stein's opinions on many planning topics, but I strongly oppose any further sanction to Mr. Stein. In fact, the council's inability to follow their own core values of inclusivity and tolerance is extremely worrying to me. The public harangue delivered by the council was far more cruel than was justified for the alleged offense. If you wish to be more clear, you're going to have to make a list of banned words that people cannot use. You cannot retroactively apply rules and punish them for things that have only recently become taboo. That's all.
The next speaker is Travis Cox, followed by Fong, followed by City of Livermore. Travis Cox, please unmute yourself.
Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. Let me say first that I have no personal history with Commissioner Stein and actually never heard of him until I read his name in the news last week. But I've now read 3 news articles, watched the April 20 Planning Commission meeting, watched the April 26 council meeting, and participated in several social media posts, one of which I authored entitled, "Commissioner Stein Deserves Grace and Mercy." In my view, Commissioner Stein's words on April 20th manifested themselves from past life experiences and worst case fears born of a deep love for Livermore, rather than language intentionally disparaging to quote unquote, those people, as he has been accused. Given his decades of love and dedication to Livermore, are Commissioner Stein's fears of a failed housing project understandable? They are to me. However, in the same breath, I say that passion and service do not justify the unwise use of what is clearly emotionally supercharged language in this community. They do, however, demand extra doses of grace and mercy. As I hope I've noted here, Commissioner Stein does not deserve summary dismissal solely for the use of the G word on April 20. I ask that the council exercise what I heard Council Member Kick call progressive discipline, along with some of that respect and compassion I've heard and read about in the new norms and values. Thank you again for this opportunity.
The next speaker is Fong, followed by City of Livermore, followed by Carl Wente. Fong, please unmute yourself.
Okay. Members of the City Council are elected officials whose mandate is to represent the best short and long-term interests of the city and its citizens. As such, we are disappointed by the actions of the City Council members during the April 26 meeting. Apparently, the City Council has become enamored with virtual signaling at the expense of mature discourse and debate, instead of focusing on the merits of Commissioner Stein's analysis on the Eden Housing Project, The council skewed off course, claiming offense and instigated a session of public bullying bordering on character assassination. As longtime residents, we are concerned about the city council's behavior. At the very least, Mr. Stein is owed an apology from the city council. Thank you.
The next speaker is listed as the City of Livermore, followed by Carl Wente, followed by Jeff Caskey. City of Livermore, please unmute yourself.
That may be an error or another technical difficulty. We can move on.
Okay. The next speaker will be Carl Wente, followed by Jeff Caskey, followed by Deborah McQueen. Carl Wente, please unmute yourself.
Hello, Carl Wente. Thank you for the council, for your service, city staff, for planning commissioners that are willing to serve. And, you know, times are interesting right now, and focusing, I think Mr. Stein acknowledged that there were possibly better words to be chosen, but I think some speakers said it's right. Don't lose the message of what Mr. Stein was saying. But in this case, I think sometimes the message of what Mr. Stein was saying didn't totally add up, of saying that the Eden Housing Project, the maintenance and upkeep wouldn't be there. But as I look at the review of other housing units out there, I mean, the city owns apartments on Bluebell and Pacific. There's affordable housing builders that operate complexes on Mocho, Chestnut, Herman, Gardella, East, Leahy, Portola Meadows, and Hillcrest. Tri-Valley Reach operates 5 affordable housing condos in Livermore. They all look the same, so I don't find merit in that argument. He also said that affordable housing should be spread throughout the city. From the list above, they are spread throughout the city. So I don't find merit in that statement. The city just recently approved townhomes, or last year off of Lassen and Springtown. Mid-Penn broke ground, 45 units on First Street near Lowe's. So they are spread. And lastly, he said he didn't want Livermore to have their undue burden. And now Livermore's got more homelessness, and we have a challenge there that we should face head on. But in terms of our undue burden of affordable housing, you know, Dublin, Pleasanton, they are building affordable units. I think Asa Stroud said 310 units in Dublin just went through. In Pleasanton, the Sunflower Hill and the likes. So other places are doing their part, and may they continue. Mr. Travis Cox said grace and mercy, respect and compassion. I fully believe that. Passion and service. So may we be passionate, compassionate. I believe there were better word choices to be had throughout that, but let's focus on, you know, what's right. And lastly, let's come on out on May 24th to continue to dive into this issue, because there is a crisis here and we should all take part. Thank you for the time.
The next speaker is Jeff Caskey, followed by Deborah McQueen. Jeff Caskey, please unmute yourself.
Okay, hello, thank you. I condemn both the choice of words and the intent of Mr. Stein's comments. However, I believe there's an opportunity here, not for silencing Mr. Stein, but to use this as a time to educate both Mr. Stein and a number of members of this community who agree with what they heard in his statements, both at the Planning Commission and subsequently. As a society, we have learned that government efforts to create concentrated, subsidized housing have created failed communities. And indeed, that's why we in Livermore have requirements for inclusionary housing distributed throughout our community, which Mr. Stein supports. If you believe that this specific downtown development is not a repeat of those failed policies, and I believe it is not, then your meetings are your opportunity to make that argument. If you believe that, explain your thoughts, but don't just simply stamp out other views. It's also true that Mr. Stein has shown a persistent and thoughtful interest and spent tireless hours supporting the positive future of this city, longer, I think, than any of the members of this council have been politically active. And I'm confident that he can take input and and operate appropriately. If we're to model a policy of inclusion, then I think the best way forward is to model persuasive, respectful, public discussion, not shutting down opinions you may find objectionable. I look forward to disagreeing with Mr. Stein many times in the future, as I'm sure we will. I urge you to keep him on and to use this as an opportunity for education. Thank you.
The next speaker is Deborah McQueen. Deborah McQueen, please unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Deborah McQueen, and I am a 28-year resident of Livermore. I'd like to thank the City Council and the Mayor for all the hard work that they put in to making Livermore such a wonderful town to live in. On April 26th, the City Council met to discuss Planning Commissioner John Stein's use of the word ghetto during an April 20th meeting. Stein is a 43-year Livermore public servant who used the word in his remarks to the Planning Commission during a discussion over the Eden Housing Plan. The word was used in a manner which is reflective of his age and personal history. Stein is an elderly Jewish man whose family and he have personally suffered the consequences from segregating groups by ethnicity or socioeconomic levels. For Stein, the word ghetto has a very specific meaning, a lived experience that those of us on the outside that haven't had that experience can't fully understand. But the City Council and Mayor rejected Stein's apology last week and moved toward removing him from his position as Planning Commissioner. Words can only be understood when analyzed in both the historical and direct personal context of the person using them. Stein used the word ghetto to describe a social condition wherein people of lower socioeconomic income are housed together in segregated areas. For Stein, the word ghetto is an historical artifact from his past, which describes the horrors of their lives. But this word is no longer allowed to be used to describe segregation by class issues. Unfortunately, no one bothered to tell that to John Stein. The new politically correct words are affordable housing. Citizens straining to follow last week's chaotic virtual meeting cringed while watching the council lavish judgment on Stein. Few people over the age of 50 have a strong grasp of SJW nomenclature and could easily make a similar error, but would we throw them under the bus for it? The answer, of course, is no. I ask the council to keep Stein. Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, would you like us to try the two that were having technical difficulties again?
Do we have any other in line?
No, sir.
Yeah, try them one last time. Give them 10 seconds, see if they can connect.
Okay. Temp terminal, please unmute yourself.
Doesn't look like there's a connection.
Okay. And City of Livermore, please unmute yourself.
Again, I think it's not going to work. And if anybody wants to submit emails to us or whatever, they're free to do that. Okay, is that the end of
yes, sir.
Public comment? Okay, so let's, I want to bring this back now to the council. And, you know, what this is about is the comments, not the decision. And at this point, I'm going to ask council who would like to speak first. And I see a lot of people have got their hand up immediately. So with that, I'll start with Councilmember Kick.
Thank you. I'm going to start by, we're Zoom, we can't see each other, but I wore this shirt today to be the example, to remind myself to stay calm during this discussion and remind us that we are leaders in here and we're also people. And so I'm going to try to be an example today. So I don't have as much experience as everybody else. long-term corporate experience like some of my other council members. But I do have a lot of management experience when it comes to managing volunteers. I've been managing groups of volunteers for 15 years. And every time someone who's working for you for free or basically free fails, I've learned that it's important to first ask, did I prepare them for success? There's nothing really else driving them. There's no pay. So they need to be passionate about what they're doing and really understand what they're doing. I was not on council when Stein was appointed, so I was not sure if he was properly prepared for success. So I asked about the process. One of the things we did earlier was change rules and procedures and norms and values to include sections about the council advisory body relationship. And this should hopefully provide us for a framework on how to train people on our expectations moving forward. It's hard to hold someone accountable when you don't set clear expectations. Do I intrinsically believe that someone with lots of life experience should have known better? Sure. But the reality is that I believe in systems of policy to prepare people for success and first hold myself accountable for the actions that I could have taken to prepare the volunteers, which planning commissioners are. They're very, very lowly paid. So basically volunteers, just like council. And so there are a couple things that I find problematic. The language, we already talked about that. We're not going to belabor that. But there was another statement where there was a statement suggesting how he would vote on a what if project, something that could come before, something like if L Street ever goes to 2 lanes, I'll be against that. So this is not just about language. It's about me realizing that maybe we did not prepare John well enough for this position. So this is why I did some research and I called Cal Cities. Cal Cities is this large organization that provides trainings for council members and for planning commissioners. And they just had a planning commissioners conference. I asked our staff. It turns out that only one of our planning commissioners attended that meeting. It was during the week. Most of our planning commissioners have full-time jobs, so they would have had to take days off work to attend this really informative, important training. So I've spoken with Cal Cities and our HR department, identifying that this is training that we could get access to. They're all webinars. They're really informational that will go over what's expected. And there's a particular webinar that I participated in because this was also part of the council member workshop training called, what's it called? It's called Dangerous Discourse to Extraordinary Engagement. And it's changing the conversation on inclusion and making sure that we have these discussions, that things will be difficult and it will be hard, okay? So I move that we send all of our planning commissioners to that training. We have access to it. We can afford it. I've checked with Cal Cities. And I think that it's important that we prepare all of our planning commissioners for success. It's a very green planning commission. And this is one step towards repairing some of the harm, saying that, Stein would invest some time in learning how to do his job better. And then I would also move that this comes with a formal warning that, what we saw was problematic and that we hope that you will take these things to heart and understand now that if this behavior continues, at that point, this conversation would happen again. That is my motion. If I need to restate it, I'm happy to do so.
No, I think that was clear. The number of people have their hands up to speak, I think, before you made that motion. But since the motion has been put forth, I've got to ask if there's a second. So there we have a second from Vice Mayor Monroe with the real hand versus the virtual hand. And so I'll leave the virtual hand in order for the to speak when we come back, I guess. But so now we have a motion. It's been seconded. And I'll ask, is there any discussion on the motion? I would ask people to just, okay, I saw Councilmember Carling and then Councilmember Bonanno. So this is the discussion of the motion that's been made and seconded.
I don't understand how the first motion has anything to do with what's on the agenda, for one thing. And I guess I'd ask the city attorney. I mean, we're here to discuss what Mr. Stein and not whether or not we want to send all planning commissioners to training. I don't understand. I mean, and furthermore, there were two motions I heard. And I don't know whether the vice mayor seconded both or one. So that's one point. And the second point is, I don't understand the council member kicked formal warning and if the behavior continues, I don't know what that means. So I don't understand either of those motions.
Let me be more clear.
Oh, wait. Let's hang on.
Alcala says.
Mr. City Attorney, can you answer Councilmember Carling's question?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This is Jason Alcala, the City Attorney. I had a similar concern when I was listening to the motion being made. The item is here before the council this evening is John Stein's comments and the city's response to that. It may be more of a stretch to get the entire planning commission, but I believe if you focus on sending Commissioner Stein, if that were the motion, to send him to this training and then give direction to staff to afford that opportunity to other planning commissioners, I think that would be consistent with the Brown Act and your agenda item before you. But I believe Councilmember Carling is correct that an action relative to the entire planning commission is not within the scope of the agenda before you this evening. So I would invite at this point.
May I
wait. Okay, so we got the one piece there, but Councilmember Carling raised a second point. Were there two motions?
Okay, so as articulated by Councilmember Kick, there was one motion and then a second motion. So I would invite you as the chair for this particular meeting as a presiding officer to request that Councilmember Kick clarify her motion so that it can be clear what is being presented to the city council, and then invite Vice Mayor Monroe to see whether she seconds that particular motion.
Okay, that's what I believe should happen at this point. So
let me restate. Okay, so I was trying to focus on my responsibility and our responsibility to just prepare people, but I'll be more specific to Stein. I was trying not to have another bashing on Stein moment. I move to send John Stein to that planning commission training. I move that staff send him to that training with a formal warning that this is how you can begin to repair the harm by taking this training. After this training, if this behavior continues, then we will have a discussion about removal. So I will leave that second part to another meeting where it's more appropriate. Again, I move to send Stein to the planning commissioners training through Cal Cities, which has lots of really informative webinars that I think will be helpful. And with that, a formal warning explaining why we're asking him to do what we're doing and the expectations moving forward.
So is there a second for that? If so, okay, I think I saw a quick hand wave from Vice Mayor Monroe. So I would like to, before we have any further discussion, I see a council member Bonanno wants to speak, but before we have any further discussion, I'd like to ask the city attorney, was that a proper motion and was it properly seconded?
The motion is proper. I would recommend that there was an explanation of the reasons why. I would invite during your discussion that those reasons be articulated so it can be clearly communicated to Commissioner Stein what the city council finds to be inappropriate.
Okay, so we've had a motion that's made and seconded, and that we've also had a clarification request that in this discussion we enumerate the reasons for the motion, is what I heard. So I think, since we're using the visual hand signals, I think I saw Council Member Bonanno go say that she wanted to speak next. This is now the discussion on the motion.
I understand. My hand that's raised on the screen is the one to try to make some comments before we got to this point. So I'm also was a little unclear on what was being proposed here. I'm very interested in hearing what other council people have to say before I vote on any motion or vote to support any motion. So that's my comment.
Councilmember Carlin.
Yeah, I think we've jumped the gun here. I mean, we've only heard one opinion from one council member about what I thought we were supposed to discuss today. And I find it a little odd that we're immediately going to a motion when we, from my point of view, we haven't decided whether or not we want to keep Mr. Stein as the planning commissioner or not. So I'm against the motion as it stands right now, because I haven't heard from Councilmember Bonanno, I haven't heard from Councilmember Vice Mayor Monroe, and I haven't heard from the mayor himself as to their point of view about Mr. Stein and whether or not he should remain on the planning commission or not. So I think it's very premature to make a motion at this point. And I'm against, so I will vote no at this point.
Okay, Councilmember Kick.
I just want to clarify to Carling, I heard a lot of commentary about how the ongoing discussion of Stein was hurtful and problematic to some people. And I wanted to move towards action and not repeat our last meeting. I felt that giving a motion and allowing people to vote on that motion would give us an idea if they think he should stay or leave. I did check in to see if that was okay and allowed, and staff let me know that absolutely I could make a motion to begin with. So just to clarify our rules and procedures, they didn't do anything wrong. It's just maybe not preferred by some of our fellow council members.
It's certainly, my impression is that it's allowed under Rosenberg's. I see Councilmember Bonanno, you have your hand up. Do you wish to speak at this time?
I wish to speak, but I'm assuming now we're going to take a vote after discussion. There's a motion on the table. We have to vote, I assume. So I can take my hand down, but.
Oh, okay. Okay, I got it. So for some reason, after this is done, you want to go ahead. I understand, I think, the purpose of the motion myself. And I also understand Councilmember Carling's concern that the primary question hasn't necessarily been determined. So I would like to suggest the spirit that I would like to take this in, and if possible, maybe that means that Councilmember Kick has to restate it. But if we decide that he's retained, then this would be the path forward. I think that's the way I took it to mean. Is that a correct understanding? And I'll ask the city attorney, does the motion have to be restated for that?
So Mayor Warner, this is Jason. As I understood it, the motion was to send him, Commissioner Stein, to training with a warning explaining the council's reasoning for its action. It does not foreclose another motion to do something different, but I would request that, it seems to me that was the intent of the motion, but it wasn't clearly articulated.
Okay, so if I just want to understand from a procedural point of view that taking this vote does not preclude a further motion and vote on further action.
Correct.
That's
so
what I understand.
Correct. To be clear, if this was to be the one and sole action taken by the city council, it would be clear to frame the motion not to remove Commissioner Stein, but rather to retain him, and while retaining him, to send him to training with the council's explanation. So I think that additional component would be helpful. And that's where we are in this part of the agenda, which is when there's a motion and second to discuss the motion and its scope, and to see whether it can be refined to come to consensus and achieve majority support by the council members going into a vote.
Okay, so I just want to make what you said there was a little bit confusing to me, and maybe an extension. As it stands now, the motion does not preclude further action.
Correct.
So if we wanted to just say, in the event that he is retained, that we support or do not support this action, that's basically what we're voting on now. Is that correct? And I'll ask Councilmember Kick, is that what I just said correct on understanding? It's what the city attorney, I think, said he understood.
That is fine with me. So
Okay,
yeah,
and then
if we take a
Councilmember-
vote
wait,
and he stays,
okay,
that's
and then Vice Mayor Monroe, is that also consistent
Well-
with your understanding of what you seconded?
Well, I'm going to go, so yes, but I want to go back to the, I think 3.1, where I think, yes, it was rules of procedure, and where I believe it spoke to motions, and that there can be 3 motions on the floor at one time done in backwards order. So this motion can sit, an interior motion can happen. City Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong. And if I'm right, tell me I'm good for having read the bit very carefully. And then as many as 3 can sit, so they could be, and then you work backwards to get to the final one. So yes, I'm fine with this, but it also, there could, as far as I understood what I read, that there could be also an interior motion.
So Vice Mayor Monroe, the concept you're referring to in the rules of procedure is what has been deemed by the city to be an amending motion, which is to modify the main motion to give additional clarification or additional conditions to be added. In this situation, if there was an additional motion to say, first motion, training with a warning. If there were an amending motion to say either to remove, that's hostile, so it's contrary, because it's hard to remove somebody and then send them to training. But if there was a motion to send him to training with the warning, and there's an amending motion to say, and we retain Councilmember Stein, or that there's a motion, amending motion to not remove Commissioner Stein, that would be the proper subject for an amending motion.
Okay, so not quite right, but that's
so
fine. I do support what Councilmember Kick.
Okay. And I will ask Councilmember Bonanno, is there anything you wish to say at this point?
Well, I do have some comments to make about this issue, which I assume we would have the opportunity to come back and make. We may have other things we want to do. There may be other conditions associated with our decision. So I feel like it's a little premature to say this is it. As I understood our city attorney, we could have additional motions that add things, but I feel like my personal feeling is I'd like to go around and gather some more information and try to make a decision that's one motion that encapsulates what we want to do tonight. And then vote. But we can vote on this one and we can.
And the only way to do that, continuing around, under my understanding of the parliamentary procedure, which I just heard, you would have to make some amending motions to do that. In my own mind, what I believe is this is not, doesn't preclude anything else. So in and of itself, do we support, in the event he is retained, this training suggestion? It doesn't say this is the only thing. It just says it's one of many possibilities. And it's precluded on whether he's retained. So I don't think there's, personally, I'll just leave it at, I see no harm in doing this, and it seems appropriate as one measure. So that's where I'm at. So I don't see any further conversation. So can we have a roll call vote, please?
Can I get clarity on the motion then? It seems to have changed.
Okay, so let me see if I can state it. I think that's part of the role of the presiding officer, maybe to do that. My understanding of the motion is that in the event that Commissioner Stein is retained, that he will be required to go to this training and that staff will make it available. Is that, I'll ask Councilmember Kick or Vice Mayor Monroe, is that a concise statement?
Yes, and that with that would come an explanation that we're asking you to go to this. And then, you know, yes. If he's retained, the condition of being retained, one condition would be that you attend this training that I think would be extremely beneficial based on my conversations with Commissioner Stein and with people who do the training, along with a formal warning of, we're asking you to do this training. So it's written down, there is record. We've asked you to do this training. That's the point of the warning, is to have a record that we asked you to do this.
Okay, Vice Mayor Monroe. You're on mute, and we're focused on, is this, right now, we just came back to just clarity, is the motion clearly stated?
That is how I understand the motion. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. At this point, I think it's been restated a number of times. I see Councilmember Carling, you have your hand raised. Is there further clarification of the motion that you need?
Yes.
Okay. What's the question?
What if he says no? And secondly, is there a time limit? I think we need to be clear.
Sure. Mr. Stein, you and I spoke on the phone earlier and we discussed this. Are you willing?
Well, wait.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Let's wait. So, Councilmember Carling, are you making an amending motion?
No, I just want Councilmember Kick to tell me, give a time limit, and I'm not sure the word to ask him to do it is the right verb.
So we can ask Councilmember Kick to clarify,
okay.
But I must say at this point, the motion has been made and seconded.
Yes, let me clarify and use my words very carefully, Bob. I will do that. Okay. I would like to say, if Stein is retained, that retention is conditioned upon taking this training. We have access to it immediately. It will take a minute to pay the fee and get him a login, but it's not that long. I think a week is appropriate time. It is not that long. It was a 2-day training. It's all webinar. It's video. He can watch at his own pace. I had a discussion with him before I made the motion to see if this was something he would be amenable to. He was amenable to it, which is why I'm suggesting it. So on condition, a condition for staying would be to participate in the Cal Cities Planning Commissioner training that I think would be extremely beneficial. Along with that, a formal written warning, and the purpose of the warning is to serve as a record, not as another slap on the hand, just a record that this is what we asked you to do to start to repair the harm. And I think a week makes sense. If you have different thoughts and would like to make an amending motion that there needs to be a different timeline, I'm welcome to that.
Okay, so I'll go to Vice Mayor Monroe. Is this continued to be your understanding of what you want to second?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion of the motion? I see none. So can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Bonanno,
Aye.
Councilmember Carling, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Councilmember Kick.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Monroe.
Aye.
Mayor Warner.
Aye. So Thank you. It passes. That was unanimous, I believe. And what I was going to say is it's good that we had our rules of procedure and other conversation before this. And I will say that one thing that we all have an opportunity here is to continue to learn our rules of procedure and Rosenberg, et cetera. And all I can say is I'm very appreciative that in fact we do have rules that we can follow. So I thankfully we have them. So now, is there further motion, any further comments? Oh, Councilmember Bonanno.
Okay, well, first, I agree. I think our rules are important. It keeps us from doing our job properly, and it helps us do our job properly. And I do appreciate what Councilmember Kick suggested. I think it's consistent with some of the suggestions I'm going to make. So I do want to go back to the matter at hand. And through our course of our public comment, I didn't hear anybody disagree that language and words matter, but how words and language is perceived and the impact words and language can have over time changes. What's acceptable can change, and I believe it's on us as empathic and sensitive human beings to learn when things change, to be aware. And that's not just political correctness, it's about caring what people find offensive and changing the words we use because they're hurtful. As I said on April 26th, I strongly objected to what Mr. Stein's words reflected about his viewpoint. What he described on the 20th is demonstrably incorrect. We have affordable housing developments in Livermore, which are diametrically opposed to the projects he compared them to, which were built 60 years ago and which by design were intended to isolate and segregate people in the least desirable areas of a city. I think based on some of what I heard Mr. Stein say this evening, I think he's beginning to understand that. If he'd been better informed at the time on April 20th, he could have understood the difference and maybe we wouldn't be here tonight. He also said he supported inclusionary affordable housing, which doesn't justify what he said about where it belongs, how it should be distributed, and how it affects the community. So coming back to what I said earlier about my view of what the best outcome could be going forward, we know what he said. We know the stir is probably too mild a word, the stir it's caused in the community. And my question is whether Mr. Stein is open and willing to grow. And can we create some space for all of us to learn something about our own biases and how what we say has impact, especially in the positions we hold as commissioners and council members. Mr. Stein took the initiative to call me several nights ago and to again apologize. I think along with his comments tonight, I really believe he has greater understanding of why what he said was considered so offensive. And as people have mentioned, the harm it's caused. It was much more sincere than what I heard on April 20th. He seems very willing to reconsider what was behind those statements and to learn from the experience. And I'm also taking into account Mr. Stein's past service, decades of serving this community, not just when he had something that he didn't like, not just when he had something to complain about, but he's participated actively over many, many years. And I think for this, he deserves credit. So I can support him retaining his position on the Planning Commission. And either as a suggestion that comes back, again, we'll maybe not get our rules of procedure right when I say this, but we can talk it through, which is sort of what I hope we can do. I would, with agreement of others, request that he visit all the affordable housing developments that we have here, spend time with members of our Human Services staff, get to know how these developments are run, how they're operated, how they lift people up. I think equity and inclusion means tolerance and giving an opportunity to people to evolve, giving people an opportunity to evolve. I don't think this compromises our commitment to shared values and priorities. I hope it might actually even strengthen it. The other thing I'd like us to discuss, perhaps make a motion or bring back some other time, is to consider holding a community workshop on affordable housing. I found in my discussions many, many times with residents, there is a lot of understandable confusion about what affordable housing is, where the funding comes from, how it gets built, what the state has to say about it, new legislation. I think we could all benefit from a common fact-based understanding of what is an important and even increasingly timely topic. This is something that we're going to be dealing with, and we should know what it's really all about before we start making comments and making decisions that we're not fully informed to do. So the last thing I'd like to say is that I'm really saddened by the divisiveness that this has caused, and frankly, by some of the comments we've heard tonight, furthered that divisiveness. Some members of the community are using this issue to encourage opposition to the Eden Housing Project. This has nothing to do with that project, and I'm disappointed that it's been used that way. After the year we have all had, I just keep thinking we should be trying to unite rather than divide ourselves from each other. We're beginning a recovery after more than a year of being physically separated from our family, from our friends, from our community members. I just ask that we all show some grace, a word that's been used several times here this evening, and some kindness towards each other, another word that's been used. And maybe we can make something good come out of what's been a very unfortunate and hurtful week and a half. So with that, I'm gonna leave it there. Hopefully, maybe we can discuss some of the suggestions and move forward together as a council and a community. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we move on to another council member, I want to clarify a couple of things, and possibly with the city attorney. You said, I think, 3 things. The first one was a suggestion, and I think it was, again, contingent. If he were to remain on the council, that's what you would like to see him visit all our projects that and kind of learn what they are and appreciate.
Yes.
I think, okay. That, based on what the city attorney said, is pertinent, and it's very similar to the motion that Council Member Kick made. And so I infer from what you said that is, at some point in the evening, should he be retained, you are going to make that motion.
Correct.
Is that what I heard? Okay. Second of all, you mentioned the need for community workshops. I think what I heard from the city attorney is that's not on the agenda tonight, and that is something that you can initiate at the next regular council meeting. And then your third comments were just what's going on is impacting everyone. Is that a correct summary?
Yes, and I'm happy.
So at some point, you're going to ask, should he be retained? You're going to ask to come back and make that motion. Is that correct?
Yes, about the touring the
Okay.
facility.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'd ask the city attorney, if I may, did I correctly state where we're at here?
Yes, so that would be a proper motion based upon the scope of your agenda today, if that were to become a motion that was seconded by the council.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Bonanno, you're not making that motion at this moment. So at that point, I'll move on to Vice Mayor Monroe.
Right. So I very much like the direction this conversation is going. I did have a point of information, which is that I'll remind you at the last Monday, we did have an update from Equity and Inclusion, and part of what Subgroup D is doing is in fact looking at affordable housing. So when we bring our recommendations before council, there actually is a time when this will likely show up. So that's just a point of information. I'm not discussing it. I wanted to go back to my preliminary remarks and frame this, if I can get them up on my screen, new computer, about how we fix mistakes. And I listed 4 steps. So one is an apology, and another is amends for harm done. Third is learning from the mistake, and the fourth is doing better in the future. And so I want us to think about how. So first of all, I think that says that I believe everyone does deserve a second chance, but it also means action. And I think Mr. Stein is moving in that direction. He has made an apology. It has, interestingly, I'm not sure satisfied everyone. And so with that, I wanted to turn to the second piece, which is amends for harm done. And this is a bit harder because the question is harm to whom? And there's harm to the community in the sense that this has brought out a whole lot of divisiveness. I'm not going to put that all on Mr. Stein, that he was clearly a catalyst for what was already there. But I guess I'm wondering, how do we go forward in making in repairing that harm? It seems to me that as Councilmember Bonanno says, we all have a part in that, and that will need to be on. The part that is our part, our communal part as Livermore, needs to happen later. It's not on the agenda for tonight. But I would actually ask Mr. Stein if he would have any ideas, and it might be thing. Well, I'll make a suggestion. It might be something along the lines of meeting with some of the people here who have spoken in public comment, who are very angry with him. Tri-Valley for Black Lives, for example. It might mean meeting with the Equity and Inclusion Working Group. So those would be my two suggestions going forward, is that would be one way to make amends. I think the motion that passed from Councilmember Kick speaks to the learning. And then the fourth piece is sort of continuing to see how you learn and grow. And I am wondering how we could put a process in place for that, assuming that were to go forward. But those four pieces were where is what I'm looking for going forward.
To make progress on that, you'll have to formulate them in terms of motions or matters initiated in the future. I see.
Still thinking on that.
Okay. Councilmember Carling is next up.
Yeah, thanks. I've been debating what to say, largely because this hasn't gone, as I mentioned earlier, it's not exactly gone the way that I thought it was going to. So I did have some remarks that I prepared. And I want to start by acknowledging and thanking all the folks that have written to us and spoken this evening. I think it's, an informed input is a sign of a healthy community. And for me, some have suggested that Mr. Stein's upbringing, we heard it again tonight in New York City, and his tenure on city council in Livermore should be considered during our deliberations this evening. Indeed, Mr. Stein's commitment to the community over the years has been noteworthy. I don't think anybody debates that. And there are others that believe that we're here to punish him because of Eden. The comments on the Eden Housing Project. For me, none of these points are relevant tonight. My comments, and as I move forward, are focused on the words Mr. Stein used at the Planning Commission meeting on April 20th, and his description of homeless and lower income residents in our community. So I'm just going to essentially reiterate what I said last week, because I think it's instructive. I mean, we heard a lot of people focus on the word ghetto. Ghetto was sort of the coda to his remarks. His remarks before that were equally offensive, if not more, to me. He didn't want Livermore to become the go-to place for homelessness. And he made that statement twice. He also said he didn't want Livermore to do more than, quote, our fair share of affordable housing. He also made that reference 2 times. He suggested that lower income earners driving pickups, vans, box trucks, dump trucks, hearses, and landscape trailers would occupy parking spaces meant for others. Finally, he stated he didn't want to see downtown become a ghetto of affordable housing. Again, he said it twice. To me, his comments taken in full, and I will emphasize taken in full, are insensitive, inexcusable, and inconsistent with our values. And he once served on city council for many years. Keep that in mind. And to me, it reveals his lack of understanding of our efforts in the city with our unsheltered population and trying to ensure all income levels have homes. His apology when he called me the other night was okay, but it didn't satisfy me because the discussion that he brought up again about the homeless suggests he still doesn't understand that. And so I don't know where we go from here, but I'm very disappointed in the direction we've gone this evening. And I will move that we remove Mr. Stein from Planning Commission.
Okay. Thank you. That's been a motion. Is there a second? I see no second, so the motion fails for lack of a second. Is that a correct way to phrase it, City Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I don't see any other hands up, but I do know that Councilmember Bonanno said she wanted us to bring it back to her.
Yes, so I will be prepared to make a motion. I would just offer comments to you first, or would you prefer I make a motion first?
Oh, you asked, did it come back to you? And so
Okay,
I
well,
think, however you want to do it.
Okay, well, can I ask Councilmember Carling a question? I mean, it may be clear, but I guess I just want to explore it a little bit. I mean, you said you still believe that Mr. Stein has a lack of understanding. I guess my question and the direction that I was going was people can change their understanding. People can learn more, people can evolve. And do we expect that of people? Do we expect it of ourselves? I'm just exploring that question. We don't have to discuss it at length, but I just feel like there is a question about, what can be learned and what can be understood if it's not understood now.
So I'll just say that you can say what you say and ask, but I think
okay.
We should think carefully about whether going off in that philosophical direction is going to be productive at the moment.
Okay.
But
fair enough. I am going to take your advice. So I'm prepared to make a motion, but I would like to first just give every council person, including the mayor, a chance to talk, or otherwise I'll make a motion. I'm typically everybody gets a chance to talk. Sorry if I'm not following.
No, go ahead. I see Vice Mayor Monroe would like to say something before you make your motion. Is that true?
Yeah, well, because never give me a chance to talk. It's actually a question of procedure. Following Councilmember Kick's action, I have formulated a motion as well that I think is not in conflict. It sort of follows along with what Councilmember Bonanno is likely to do, and so I just want to make sure that she can make her motion, we can vote on it. I can make my motion, we can vote on it, and sort of piecemeal it there. Does that make sense? That's
yes.
I'm just trying to check.
Yeah. So here's the way it works. If you want to amend Councilmember Bonanno's motion, you can. If you feel you need to amend it, but in the same way that I believe what Councilmember Bonanno said, it was complementary, additional to what Councilmember Kick said. So if you feel you want to change what Councilmember Bonanno is going to, you think she is about to say, then make an amending motion. But if you find that you can live with an additional motion and not needing to change Councilmember Bonanno's motion, that's probably the best way to go. Because once we get into amending and everything else,
I'm not talking about amending.
Get through it.
I'm talking about a complementary one following. So a third one.
So then let Councilmember Bonanno make her motion.
That's all I'm checking. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I will move that we retain Mr. Stein on the Livermore Planning Commission and that we require him to meet with our human services staff and take what is a tour of the affordable housing developments in Livermore. This is a tour I've taken. It's fairly prescriptive. It's got some overview material. It has a visit to many of the sites in Livermore. I don't think I need to define it more than that because I think it's very well defined by Mr. Uranga, Fran Reisner, and Claudia Young. So that would be my motion. Is that clear enough?
Yes, I'll second. Any discussion on the motion? Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Bonanno,
Aye.
Councilmember Carling,
No.
Councilmember Kick,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Monroe,
Aye.
Mayor Warner.
Aye. And so what, I didn't hear Councilmember Carling's vote. Was
Oh,
no, okay, so that's 4-1. All right, that passes. So Vice Mayor Monroe.
As previously mentioned, I have a motion myself. I would like to move that Mr. Stein meet with the equity inclusion members of the Equity and Inclusion Working Group as part of as a separate meeting from to discuss with their concerns and to talk with them as part of this would be part of making amends to a group that has formed around equity and inclusion. Is that clear enough?
no. Which subgroup?
I said the entire working group.
Oh, my.
You're not on. You're not muted, Mr. City Manager. The reason so let me clarify though, which is the reason I'm saying that is that issues of equity and inclusion have been raised that are not specific to the housing element, the housing subgroup, but rather to the entire community, and therefore, since that's the group that is working on these issues in Livermore, the entire working group would be the working group I would suggest.
So that was a motion. I take it. Is there a second?
I would make an amending motion.
I think the way this works, I'm not sure. I'm getting tangled up here. I ask the city attorney, do we make an amending motion at this point, or do we need a second before we do that?
There's no motion on the table. There's just a motion without a second, so there's nothing to amend at this point.
That's what I thought.
Second.
That's what I thought. So I would suggest a clean way through here is to let this one go and somebody make the motion the way they think they want to second it. So, but however, I don't see a second for the motion. So that motion fails. Councilmember Kick, you have your hand up. Okay. Are we, have we done a sufficient number of motions, or Vice Mayor Monroe?
I'm going to try one more. Oh, please mute yourself, Mr. Mayor. It's yeah. So I would like to. There has been, I think, part of our job is to make sure we're communicating with our city. I think the people that we've heard comment tonight have fallen into three groups. Those, and it really doesn't matter what those groups are. But I think we owe them a clear explanation of what happened, what we've done here, and the complexity of it. So I would like to move that be upon us. Now, I believe that would be part of what could be done here tonight, but Mr. City Attorney, am I correct?
I don't think so. But go ahead, Mr. City Attorney.
I think what will be within the scope of the meeting this evening is to provide direction to staff to return with that at a future meeting for you to take action on.
So that's not a motion, that's just like a matters initiated?
It's direction to return, correct?
Right, okay. So we just need head nods on that one.
Yes,
So,
that's the will of the council.
Okay. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. At this point, I don't see any other hands raised. I think we've had enough motions and et cetera. So before we adjourn, I'd like to offer Mr. Stein the opportunity to actually accept the conditions that were voted on tonight.
Mr. Stein, please unmute yourself.
I would be happy to accept the conditions. I think it will make me a better planning commissioner.
Okay, good. And I'll just say, with all the different comments, everything, where I'm going to wrap this up, what I see happen tonight was a compassion, really, and an understanding that people get a second chance. And I'll just say that that's consistent with my own experience, life experience. However, there aren't more chances after that, after something like that. So I'll just leave it at that. The way it is, that's my understanding. And with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting to the regular meeting on May 10th at 7 o'clock, held virtually via Zoom. So thank everyone. Thank you all.